welcome. I am Luby Navarro, school board member of Miami-Dade County Public Schools in sunny Miami, Florida. I'm also the co-chair of the commission. I want to welcome all of you this cold and chilly but beautiful morning here in Columbus, Ohio. It's the first time I come to this beautiful city, and I know we're honored with the mayor, which I will present shortly. But I want to welcome all of you to the Midwest Regional hearing of the National Latino Commission on the Census 2020. NALEO Education Fund established a commission to highlight the challenges facing the Census 2020 and the need to obtain a fair and accurate count of Latinos and all of our nation's population. The hearing is held in Columbus, Ohio, with panelists from the Midwest Great Lakes region providing testimony today. The regions are home to some of the fast-growing emerging Latino communities in the United States. These areas also have a geographically diverse populations, both Latino and non-Latino, including urban, suburban, and rural communities. It is critical that there be a full and accurate count of the region's population because the census data will guide the allocation of more than $200 billion in federal funding annually to the Midwest and Great Lakes area. The census data will also determine how congressional seats are apportioned in the regions. Accurate data are needed to ensure their representation for all the region's residents. One of the most significant threats to the Census 2020 is the addition of the untested citizenship question that will discourage residents from responding to the census, resulting in inaccurate data and an increase in the cost of the census. Panelists today will be addressing their perspectives on the impact of the question on the communities they represent. The leadership of the boards of NALEO and NALEO Education Fund selected the commissioners to include a bipartisan group of key leaders from all levels of public service representing diverse communities throughout the nation. Accurate census data are also critical to ensuring that policymakers at all levels of government make informed decisions. This is particularly important for local policymakers who are on the front lines of addressing the needs of their communities. This is the fifth and final hearing of the commission, and those of you that have been following us, we've been to many states and had the privilege and honor of hearing testimony from critical areas and states about the issues they're facing in the 2020 census. We have held hearings in Los Angeles, New York, San Antonio, and Orlando, and today here in Columbus, Ohio. The findings of the commission will be included in a report that will be issued in May 2019 in Washington, D.C. I know that I would like to also welcome some of my fellow commissioners that are here with me. I will give each and every one of them an opportunity to present themselves. But before I do that, I want to recognize some of the elected officials that are here, in addition to some of the ones that will speak this morning in opening remarks. I'd like to welcome the mayor of this great city, Columbus, Ohio, Mayor Andrew Ginther. Welcome, Mayor. I'll recognize you, and then I know we have the pleasure of hearing you. We also have the honor of having with us one of the county commissioners from Franklin County, who had an opportunity to speak. Welcome, Commissioner, Honorable Kevin Boyce, Commissioner, Franklin County. Welcome, sir. We also have with us Dr. Ortiz, Franklin County Coroner's Office. Welcome. She's an elected official here in Franklin County. Also, I would like to recognize Elizabeth Guzman Bowman, Ohio Latino Affairs Commissioner. Welcome. And we have the esteemed honor also to have us join. I know he drove 2.5 hours this morning. My colleague on the NALEO board, the Honorable Steve Corona, NALEO board member, also Vice President of the Fort Wage Community Schools, Chair of the National Council of School Board Members. Welcome, everyone, to the hearing. At this time, I'd like to give each of the commissioners an opportunity to present themselves to you so that you know who we are. Thank you. I'll start with my left.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, everyone, for coming. My name is David Santiago. I'm a state representative in the Florida House of Representatives. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is James Diosa. I'm the mayor of Central Falls, Rhode Island.
Good morning, Madam Chair and everybody. My name is Carlos Toon. I am a state representative in Rhode Island.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pauline Medrano. I serve as Dallas County Treasurer, and I also serve as the NALEO, the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, National President.
Buenos dias. Good morning. My name is Lilly Cavanaugh, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Latino Affairs Commission.
Rosemary Rodriguez. I'm a former Denver City Councilwoman, but before I was on the City Council, I worked for the mayor for 11 years. I've since started a census engagement project. We call it Together We Count in Colorado.
Muy buenos días. My name is Walter Tejada, formerly elected Arlington County Board member, County Board of Supervisors in Arlington, Virginia, currently appointed to the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. Great to be here.
Thank you. I would also like to announce that the Commissioner's co-chair, California Secretary of State Alex Padilla, will be viewing and hearing the hearing today remotely, and I welcome you, Secretary and Commissioner, to the meeting. I would be remiss if I did not recognize, and you'll hear from him, our leader, our CEO from the NALEO Board and NALEO Education Board, Mr. Arturo Vargas. Thank you, Mr. Vargas. I would like to express our appreciation for the partnerships that we have made this hearing possible. Particularly, I know on a personal level, I know we all are very honored to be here in the home of our Commissioner, Lilly Cavanaugh. She has worked, I know, so hard to get us here. So, Commissioner Cavanaugh, thank you for all you've done to ensure that this hearing was successful on a personal level. I know, speaking on behalf of the entire Commissioner, we thank you so much. We are grateful to our co-hosts, which have included the City of Columbus, Franklin County's Columbus Counts Census 2020 campaign. Our co-hosts also include the Ohio Commission on the Hispanic Latino Affairs. I would now like to introduce the Honorable Mayor, Andrew J. Ginther, who was elected mayor to the City of Columbus in 2015, same year I was elected. Mayor Ginther previously served on the Columbus City Council from 2007 to 2015, including serving as president from 2011 into ensuring the office of mayor. Under Mayor Ginther's leadership, the City of Columbus was named America's Opportunity City, and Mayor Ginther continues to work with community, business, faith, and labor leaders to promote opportunities for every person in every neighborhood. Mayor Ginther's policy priorities include developing distinctive city neighborhoods, reducing infant mortality, strengthening early childhood education, community involvement in public safety. In his first year in office, the city was awarded the U.S. Department of Transportation Smart City Challenge Grant, making Columbus America's smart city with innovative transportation approaches. The mayor is a native of Columbus with a long record of community service. Welcome, Mayor Ginther, to our commission hearing. Let's give him a round of applause.
Good morning. What a great morning in the city of Columbus, and I am so thrilled that our friends from Miami have brought a little warmth our way. It'll get a little warmer in the weeks to come. Nothing says spring in Columbus like snow on St. Patrick's Day. Luckily, the parade ended before the snow came, but we're thrilled to have you, and it's an incredible honor for my co-chair of our local effort here, Commissioner Boyce, and I to welcome NALEO and all of the incredible work you do across the country. And we couldn't be more proud to have your colleague leading our effort here with our census work. Lilly Cavanaugh is an incredible force for good in our community, and we know has an incredible role nationally. Just a few things about Columbus. We're the 14th largest city in the country, the fastest growing economy in the Midwest. It seems that every week we're ending up on someone's best of list, whether it's the 9 must-see destinations worth a visit, 32 places to go and visit and eat. TripAdvisor said Columbus is one of the 20 top places to visit in the U.S. You know, 2/3 of our residents are doing very well, some of which better than they ever have before. But 1/3 of our neighbors have been left out of Columbus's success story. And that's a big focus for our administration, our partnership with the county, is how do we ensure that every family in every neighborhood is sharing in the Columbus success story. We know that many of our neighbors are struggling to make ends meet. It's more important than ever that they stand up and be counted. And that's why our collective effort is so important. 2 weeks ago today in this room, I stood with my colleague and co-chair, Commissioner Boyce, to announce the creation of the joint Columbus-Franklin County Complete Count Committee for the 2020 census. We must ensure a complete count in the 2020 census for many different reasons. Our representation in Congress and in Washington, D.C. depends on a complete and accurate count. Our community, social service agencies, and nonprofits rely on federal funding, which uses census data. Federal grants for our city, county, and state to maintain and build our highway and transportation infrastructure use the latest census data. For these reasons and many more, I directed my staff to create a complete count committee made up of diverse community members and leaders. Had you been here with us 2 weeks ago, I think you would have been impressed with the depth and the breadth of the leadership of this group that this community has counted on to lead this effort. Our Latino Hispanic Subcommittee Chair, Lilly Cavanaugh, has been a huge supporter of our efforts, and I applaud her work as a commissioner on NALEO's National Latino Commission on Census 2020. We have a vibrant and growing Latino community in Columbus. Today, we will hear from a diverse group of witnesses about the importance of the 2020 census for the Latino community and other groups here in Central Ohio. Again, to Co-Chair Navarro, the entire commission, we are thrilled to have you, including a fellow mayor, a brother-in-arms, and thrilled to have you here in Columbus, and look forward to hearing from the witnesses and continuing to support the incredibly important work of this commission. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Ginther, for your warm welcome. We're very excited to be here again. At this time, I would like to introduce the Honorable Kevin L. Boyce, who has served as Franklin County Commissioner since 2016. Commissioner Boyce has a long record of public service as a state representative, state treasurer for Ohio, and Columbus City Council member. As a state representative, his priorities included community and family advancement and higher education. As state treasurer, Commissioner Boyce's achievements included reducing pension fund management fees by 63% and launching the nation's first web training for treasurers, Continued Learning. As a member of the Columbus City Council, he successfully implemented several initiatives relating to the city's budget and finances and infrastructure improvement, the expansion of greenways, and youth and minority opportunities. Commissioner Boyce is an active member of the historic St. Paul AME Church in Columbus, where he serves as a steward and is an active participant in activities for youth and young adults. Welcome, Commissioner Boyce, to our hearing.
Thank you, Chairwoman Navarro, and to certainly this distinguished panel of commissioners, the National Latino Commission on the Census for 2020 Midwest Regional Hearing, all of those who are here with us today. We so much value your presence and, most importantly, your input. And I certainly want to give a special acknowledgement to Lilly Cavanaugh, your commissioner, who is a tremendous leader in Central Ohio and a great friend. And so, yeah, please give her a round of applause, because she's truly a voice in the right direction for us all. And then certainly to my partner, Mayor Ginther, who's doing a tremendous job leading our city and really our region. A little bit about Franklin County. First of all, I should say, as the chairwoman said, sunny Florida. Welcome to sunny Franklin County. And I agree with the mayor. Thank you for bringing a ray of sunshine with you. We needed it. It's been a long time coming. But Franklin County is the largest county in Ohio with 1.3 million residents. And as the mayor shared, one of our greatest challenges is growth. And embedded in that growth is the opportunity that is the opportunity for every citizen to do well, meaning that a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's really our mantra at Franklin County. We're diving into the conversation around poverty and how we can eradicate those who fall between the cracks and eliminate those scenarios for families and children. But I ask you a question today. What would you do with $33 billion? Could you solve the issue with poverty? Could you strengthen access to quality and affordable health care? Could you improve our public education system? Can you strengthen our infrastructure? The answer to all of those is yes. Now more than ever, growing communities like Central Ohio need every resource we can to ensure that every family and every citizen, every resident has an opportunity to be successful just like their neighbor. Our challenges are great. And at the heart of those challenges is ensuring that every resident is counted, not just in Franklin County, but also throughout this great state of Ohio. Nationally, we know that Latinos represent a great portion of the American population. Nearly 60 million people identify themselves as Latino residents. 27.8 million of those are eligible voters. There are 6,700 elected Latino officials and 42 members of Congress. Quite frankly, with those statistics, the reality is that there is no excuse for all of us to not ensure that every voice, every person, every family, every resident, everywhere is counted in this process. Our commitment here in Franklin County, working with Mayor Ginther, is to ensure that there's an easy pathway to accessing information that ensures that those residents are counted. But I know this for sure, we can't do it alone. It's hearings like this that allow us to bring exposure to the conversation, but most importantly, help ensure that everyone understands what's at stake. And that's our greatest challenge. And so we thank you, but more importantly, we join you. We thank you for being here, but more importantly, we join you in the fight. We join you in the fight to ensure that we're better tomorrow than we are today, and ensuring that every resident has their own access to opportunity, a shot at the American dream. And that's really what this conversation is about. I'm so glad to see Dr. Ortiz here, who is our county coroner, because she is a pioneer. She is a person that has paved the way for all of us who identify ourselves as minorities. But more importantly, she's here and she understands that her role is bigger than her job as coroner, that it is as a leader. And so thank you for being here, and thank you for being a part of this conversation. Let me conclude by saying this. While the hearings today will help us illustrate some of the challenges in making sure that every resident is counted, the bigger challenge and the greater test to us will be when we start the process of ensuring that these folks are counted, that everyone is counted. And so today, I leave you with this. Let us begin to build on the pathway of a plan that includes everyone. Let us begin to build on a plan that is broad in scope and ensures that no stone goes unturned, no door goes unknocked, no person is left out unengaged. And so with that, working together, I know that we can make tomorrow better than today. And I hope you'll join me in fighting for that $33 billion, because I really believe it's the first step into moving the needle. So thank you so much for your leadership, Chairperson, and to the Commission that here, thank you for traveling to Franklin County. You should know that our funds come from mostly sales tax. So I want to encourage you to spend as much as you can while you're here. And I'll do the same when I come to your communities. God bless you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Boyce. At this time, I would like to ask our first panelist to join us at the table, and I know you've already have joined us. The biographical statements of each of the panelists for the hearing are available in your package you received when you arrived. I'd like to introduce the three panelists and ask them to then follow their presentation after the introductions. First, I have the honor of presenting the Honorable Alma Anaya, the District Commissioner for Cook County. Welcome, Commissioner. Also with us for the first panel is Dr. Tracy Najera, Executive Director, Children's Defense Fund from Ohio. Welcome. And our last panelist is Mr. Daniel Ortiz, Outreach Director of Policy Matters, Ohio. Welcome to our three panelists. At this time, I'd like to ask the Honorable Alma Anaya to begin her presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank the Commission for allowing me to testify. I think that this is an issue that we have all really learned the importance. So it's an honor to be here with colleagues throughout the Midwest to discuss the best practices for the crucial topics that are here that we have to address for the 2020 census. Again, my name is Alma Anaya. I am a Cook County Commissioner in the 7th District of Cook County, which is comprised of a large portion of Chicago's southwest side. The district is primarily Latino and has the highest number of foreign-born individuals of all the districts throughout Cook County. The proposed citizenship question is one of the many concerns we face with the upcoming census. Nearly $20 billion in federal funding are allocated in Illinois from the 2010 census, and an even higher amount is expected for 2020 for essential services that impact the hardest to count communities, such as housing vouchers, school lunches, food assistance for women, infants, and children. Our local economy is still in recovery from a 2-year-long budget crisis that severely impacted our social services system. One which continuously affects our undercount, and it's critical to the communities that I serve. My district also has had among the lowest mail return rates in the state in 2010 for the census. If this trend maintains, the Cook County Board may be at risk of losing 2 of its 7 commissioner seats. The county's 2nd district, which neighbors mine, tops only my district when it comes to the lowest mail return rates and is majority African American. I mention this because the undercount will have a detrimental effect in Black and Latino communities in the Chicagoland area. With a high number of residents living beneath the poverty line and the technological divide we can face with this upcoming census primarily online platform, assuring the participation of our constituents is a complicated task. In recent years, Chicago has experienced severe population decline amongst African Americans and an outward shift to the suburbs from Latino immigrant residents due to a myriad of issues that include limited opportunities for social mobility and skyrocketing housing costs. We literally cannot afford to lose more residents. Furthermore, communities of color in particular already have a deep-seated mistrust in government that historically has not worked in their favor. Placing current political climate around immigration on top of this makes for the perfect storm of barriers to help have a confident and accurate complete count. The most recent data available to the Cook County Board as of 2017 indicates that Cook County government received 14 federal grants with a total of just over $43 million that was calculated using census data. This is over half of the federal fundings received for the 2nd largest county in America. It is not an exaggeration that an undercount will limit our services and force our operations to adopt in a way that will potentially harm our workforce and the public. This is why it's imperative to work collaboratively with other local governments, non-for-profits, and private sectors to pool our resources as we head into the 1-year mark before the 2020 census. Solutions to address the various challenges we face will look differently depending on the characteristics and population of every jurisdiction. My colleagues and I represent racially diverse populations with concerns specifically around urban environments. However, to work successfully with our colleagues at the state level, we must also be conscious of the unique challenges faced by many rural communities throughout the state and recall that although populous, Chicago is an urban bubble in Illinois. Currently, there are various coalitions and legislators supporting 2 proposals at the state level that would ultimately result in at least $25 million in funding for census outreach in Illinois. Illinois also has a statewide complete count commission that has reported on the current population and economic needs of Illinois and the urgency of the complete count. In Cook County specifically, the board recently approved a Complete Count Census Commission, which will be launched this spring and will be the county's formal Complete Count entity. A request for proposals for $2.5 million is also being developed through the county for outreach and marketing purposes. Since it's the largest municipality in Cook County as the city of Chicago, we also have closely monitored plans there to launch a similar committee, which is still in process. One way I have worked to streamline the work and stay updated is to convene monthly meetings in partnership with the city, county, and state level, and also with other civic organizations and non-for-profits to keep an update on the proposals and the RFPs that are going out. And this is our main intention, to serve as a resource and not duplicate each other's work. These conversations will continue to be particularly important as the work of the various committees and commissions develops. One of our current tasks is to analyze data on hard-to-count communities within their jurisdiction that we represent in order to create a clear understanding of where the outreach efforts should be targeted. We are pulling resources of our own our county GIS department and using other tools and mapping tools to identify where those hard-to-count populations have been. When it comes to my own community, the 7th District, there is a large cause for concern, but it also creates an opportunity to be creative. There are 110,000 plus foreign-born residents living in my district. Rates from immigration authorities in the Southwest Side neighborhoods are not common, and they are very well documented in the media. This leads me to question how there can be trust to open the doors for other follow-ups with the census workers. This is why I plan to create a 7th District Complete Count Committee throughout the partnership with local non-for-profits and constituents. I believe that Know Your Right type of workshops will be needed to inform my constituents about Census Bureau regulations around confidentiality and data sharing. It is a fine line to walk when you need the public to participate in order to secure resources and also trying to assure them of their own safety. I have also discussed the possibility of turning our government and organizational offices in the district into quote-unquote safe places or hubs where people can walk through and can be walked through the answering the survey in efforts to enhance accessibility and lessen concerns. Through these discussions, however, I have many other questions and concerns. Can individuals fill out the survey if they're not in their address anymore? What is the process of our jail population, and how do we count them? Specifically because the Cook County Jail is actually located in my district. How can our hospital system, which the county also oversees, serve as a resource for achieving a fair and accurate count? How can we work together with other hard-to-count populations, given that there's current tension because of scarcity of resources? This is specifically important. Now we're seeing in Chicago and Illinois, as we're seeing quite tension between the Black and Latino communities. These questions can only be answered through ongoing dialogue and partnership with local stakeholders, community members, and in other jurisdictions just like we're having today. And I can't stress enough that overall we cannot afford to work in silos or in a competitive manner. But in that way, we have to be supportive and be there with clear goals. There is just too much at stake, as we've highlighted. Again, thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you, Commissioner Anaya, for that very valuable testimony. We know as elected officials we have a lot of work to do in our own districts, but it is imperative that we begin our complete count committees, and I want to thank you for your leadership and everything that you're doing in Chicago. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome again Dr. Najera to begin her presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Let's see if this is on. Thank you for inviting me to testify this morning on the matter of the 2020 census and the child undercount. My name is Tracy Nájera, and I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Defense Fund of Ohio. I'd also like to thank the National Association of Latino Elected Officials for hosting this important hearing on the 2020 census. I want to begin by saying that I'm very encouraged and thank our leaders in Franklin County, especially Commissioner Kevin Boyce and Mayor Andrew Ginther, and our Executive Director for the Ohio Commission for Hispanic Latino Affairs, Lilly Cavanaugh, for their leadership in standing up a broad-based coalition representing all the diverse facets of our community and making sure that everyone here in Central Ohio counts. I want to share a little bit about who I represent. So, Children's Defense Fund, we provide a strong, effective, and independent voice for all children who cannot vote, lobby, or speak for themselves. We pay particular attention to the needs of poor children, children of color, and those with disabilities, and we do this by educating our policymakers and community members about their needs. I'm also here on behalf of the Ohio Census Advocacy Coalition, which is a group of over 30 nonprofit organizations and growing here in Ohio, representing community action, direct service, policy, and advocacy organizations throughout the state. We formed in mid-2018 and have been working collaboratively throughout the state to encourage localities to stand up complete count committees. And we've been working with policymakers for state and federal funding to support awareness building, communications, and get out the count efforts for the next year. And we've also been serving as a voice against action that would suppress a complete count in Ohio and other parts of the country. Especially complete counts amongst our new immigrants, our new Americans, and other hard-to-count populations. So for nearly 2 years, we've been building awareness around the state on the upcoming census, and we recognize as a child advocacy organization that many of our neighborhoods and communities throughout the state, especially our Latino, African American, and New American immigrant communities, are at particular risk of not being engaged to participate in this critical decennial count. This is a very concerning issue, especially in light of the report, Our Pathways to a Brighter Future, Ohio's New Americans, which states that while Ohio's population growth is almost stagnant, growing at only 0.15% since 1998, immigrants help to stabilize Ohio's population and are a source of growth. This is so critical in that it's clear that an accurate census data is the lifeblood of a strong nation, and particularly of a strong Ohio. An undercount would be devastating for our state, in that we are at risk of losing political influence. So at one point in time, about 40 years ago, we had about 24 congressional seats here in Ohio. And after the 2010 count, we lost 2 congressional seats and are down to now 16. The upcoming counts could mean another loss of 1 to 2 congressional seats. Furthermore, as Commissioner Boyce stated earlier, $33 billion in federal funding is distributed in Ohio based on the census. And nationally, that's about $600 billion for the rest of the country for things like Medicaid, children's health insurance, Head Start, all these things that we prioritize. Now, there are 2 issues that face us as a nation and as a state that I want to speak briefly about. The first being the hard-to-count communities and children, and the second being the citizenship question. So I'll start a little bit here with the citizenship question. So we see this as stoking fear in immigrant families and neighborhoods. So the citizenship question will compromise the U.S. Census Bureau's ability to complete an accurate count of every person living in the United States, placing every community at risk of being underrepresented and under-resourced. Studies have shown that inclusion of this question threatens the undercounts of our immigrant residents regardless of their legal status. The citizenship question is problematic to Ohio specifically because our state's population growth and stability, as I stated earlier, is in large part due to our immigrant population, who contribute significantly to our economy and the vitality of our neighborhoods and communities. Now, just a little short update on this item. About 2 weeks ago, Judge Richard Seaborg in San Francisco said that Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross's decision to add the question was arbitrary and capricious and would violate a constitutional requirement that the census accurately count the U.S. population. So according to the ruling, the record in this case has clearly established that including the question on the 2020 census is fundamentally counterproductive to the goals of obtaining accurate citizenship data about the public, and also including an untested and controversial citizenship question would undermine the quality and accuracy of the census in every community. We also believe there is grave risk of a significant undercount, especially amongst hard-to-count population groups that are already fearful of answering government surveys. As a result, Children's Defense Fund Ohio and our partners are supportive of two pieces of federal legislation that would ensure an accurate census, adhering to the constitutional requirement and address our concerns. The first being from Representative Norton, legislation that would prohibit the Census Bureau from including questions on citizenship, nationality, or immigration status on the decennial census. The rationale being that the American Community Survey, which is regularly given on a rotating sampling of households, already asks these questions. Further, the inclusion of an untested question on citizenship status the Census Bureau risks reducing response rates and threatens to underemphasize minority communities. And the second legislation being the Census Idea Act, which is a 3-year review process for each question proposed to the decennial census. So it would prohibit the administration's planned question and ensure that all lines of inquiry undergo proper vetting and testing before being added to a census. And we also face, challenges here with the child undercount. So young children are undercounted in the census at a higher rate than any other age group. Young children, defined as children under the age of 5, have been undercounted for decades, disadvantaging their families and communities and neighborhoods. In the 2010 census, the net undercount rate for young children was 4.6%. Meaning more than 2.2 million in this age group are not included. This is a higher net undercount rate than for any other age group. Even among other children, those under 5 years old are more likely to be missed from the census. And some groups of young children, depending on their race, ethnicity, or where they live, have higher than average undercounts. Young Black and Hispanic children have the highest net. Experts estimate that approximately 6.5% of young Black and Hispanic children were overlooked in 2010, roughly twice the rate of their white counterparts. So nationally, about 4.5 million children under the age of 5 live in hard-to-count neighborhoods. And Ohio has the 10th highest number of young children living in hard-to-count census tracts, so about 106,000. So what does that look like, in Ohio? It means that 73% of children in Cleveland live in hard-to-count census tracts. 52% of Columbus children are also at risk of being undercounted. 46% of children in Cincinnati, and 38% of children in Toledo. And the question often comes up, why are children so often missed? And it's widely believed that poor households are difficult to enumerate, and young children have a higher poverty rate than any other age group. This national finding is especially true in Ohio, where children are the poorest segment of our population, with 1 in 5 children under the age of 18 living in poverty. We may also want to remember that the youngest of our children are typically the poorest, with half the kids in Ohio being born, their births are being paid for by Medicaid. Nationally, we find that young children and large families may also go uncounted because they live in complex households. In 2010, about a quarter of our young children lived in households of 6 or more people, and a recent study found that 40% of all children under 5 lived in households with this type of arrangement. In Ohio, this is also particularly difficult in that our state is at the epicenter of the opioid crisis. So we have many children that are living in unconventional living arrangements, either with relatives or grandparents in formal and informal settings. And, as you can imagine, they'll receive the census form and really not be sure what to do, if they should count the grandchildren or the kids that are living in their household or not. So just really quickly, I want to circle back to Ohio in general. So we have a very fast-growing immigrant population that represents many different cultures, ethnicities, and languages. And Ohio needs to be prepared to reach all segments of our community. As of right now, the state of Ohio has not yet stood up its complete count commission. That requires an executive order that hasn't been issued yet. Further, last Friday, our new governor, Governor DeWine, has introduced his budget, which didn't explicitly state or have an appropriation for census outreach for 2020. So these are two things that we're actively working with our partners to advocate for, and we're looking forward to working with our policymakers in the House and Senate also to make sure that we have proper appropriations and support for this effort. Let's see. So there's a couple things that we want to do. We want to make sure that sufficient outreach is conducted. We want to make sure that we treat this similarly to we would for a get out the vote efforts. We need to have modern communications tools. Think geo-targeting, think social media, to make sure that we energize everyone and make sure that they feel that they're part of this effort, that they're part of the community, and that they truly count. So thank you for the opportunity to offer this testimony, and I welcome any questions you may have later.
Thank you, Dr. Najera. Next, I'd like to introduce again Mr. Daniel Ortiz, Outreach Director, Policy Matters, Ohio. Welcome. We look forward to your testimony.
Good morning, Chairwoman Navarro and ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. My name is Daniel Ortiz, and I'm the Outreach Director for Policy Matters, Ohio, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working for a more vibrant, equitable, sustainable, and inclusive Ohio. And thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning about the upcoming census and for convening these field hearings. Data for the Census Bureau is vital to Policy Matters work. We rely on the census, the current population survey, and the American Community Survey to conduct research that forms our understanding of ordinary Ohioans' lives, how their well-being has changed over time, and how policy can impact them. Our organization uses data from the census to inform analysis as we advocate for policies like Medicaid, SNAP, and CHIP that strengthen the economy and enable all Ohioans to thrive. This year, the Trump administration is considering adding a question about citizenship status, which would be the first time such a question appeared on the census since 1950. Including a controversial citizenship question would result in an undercount of the Latino community and other hard-to-count communities across the country and in Ohio. The Census Bureau's own chief scientist, John About, testified that the citizenship question would be likely to produce a drop in the initial self-response rate and make the count more costly. The 2020 census should provide a fair and accurate count of all communities and do no harm to the children and families who rely on vital government programs, whether Black, brown, or white. The citizenship question is designed to intimidate Americans with immigrant backgrounds, whether they are citizens or not. That fear is grounded in real history. The United States used census information to intern Japanese citizens during World War II. Questions about citizenship have no place in the U.S. Census. Making respondents report their citizenship status would lower response rates, raise administrative overhead, and reduce the accuracy of census data. But the highest costs would fall on underserved communities that are disproportionately Black, brown, and immigrant. This question would erode confidence in government, intimidate families into skipping the census, and push people further into the shadows. If the citizenship question is included, there will undoubtedly be a decrease in the count of the Latino community. Leaving people out of the count means fewer health and human service dollars to states, political underrepresentation, and lower data quality to measure American families' well-being. Census data are used to distribute more than $33 billion in federal funding dollars in Ohio. And a census that does not count everyone and reduces federal funding for vital programs and services deepens systematic inequality and further drives hunger and poverty in underserved communities. The root causes of these vexing problems becomes even harder to identify without data that accurately represents our communities. Not long ago, I was optimistic for changes to the 2020 census. The Census Bureau under the Obama administration and with guidance of the Interagency Committee for the Review of the Racial and Ethnic Standards made thoughtful revisions to the Statistical Policy Directive on race and ethnic standards for federal statistics and administrative reporting. These reforms would have structured race and ethnic data to one clear, combined question that is more intuitive in capturing accurate responses for hard-to-count communities. This is an example of the census responding to a well-documented problem. It gave many hope that we would attain a more complete count. Sadly, those recommendations were rejected. Going forward, we have multiple questions on race and ethnicity, and now have to wrestle with the citizenship question that could lead to an undercount that hurts children and families. According to reports from our friends at the Children's Defense Fund of Ohio, the undercount of young children has gotten worse with every census since 1980. In Ohio, 106,000 children live in an area the U.S. Census Bureau considers hard to count, and only 9 other states have more young children at risk of being undercounted. Without an accurate count of children, our state and local government could lose billions of dollars in resources we need to reduce child poverty, hunger, and infant mortality. Like many of you, I'm worried about the consequences of a census that proposes drastic changes without time for review and resources for robust oversight. The Latino community across the United States and in Ohio has reason to be skeptical, and many feel intimidated by changes that may skew participation and compromise data integrity. Ohio's immigrant population experienced specific trauma in 2018. Immigration and Customs Enforcement raided Corso's Flower and Garden Center in Sandusky, Ohio, detaining 114 workers last June. Just 2 weeks later, ICE raided Freshmark meatpacking plants in Salem, Massillon, and Canton, detaining another 146 workers. Also, there has been an increase of recent arrivals from Puerto Rico to the cities of Cleveland, Lorain, and Youngstown, as well as other small towns since the humanitarian crisis caused by hurricanes in the fall of 2017. Now, Puerto Ricans are American citizens, but they too have been harmed by an administration that refused to allocate sufficient aid for actual disaster relief before declaring it would seek to misallocate emergency funding to build a wall spanning just one of our borders, the one we share with Mexico. These recent bad experiences with government agencies presents unique challenges for reaching members of the Latino community. The workers administering the census field survey should be well-staffed, resourced, and prepared to contextualize the survey in an informative and culturally sensitive approach for these hard-to-count communities. A fair and accurate census requires a complete count. If the 2020 census contains a citizenship question, it will be less fair, less accurate, and incomplete. If we believe everyone counts, then let's continue to acknowledge these obstacles to a complete count and speak clearly to the Latino community about what is at stake. I hope that together with this commission, we can achieve greater transparency and awareness of the process, the involvement of informed elected officials to face these challenges together, and the resources necessary to prepare hard-to-count communities for the challenges that lay ahead. Thank you, and open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz, for your presentation. At this time, we've concluded the presentations for the first panelists, and I'd like to provide our commissioners an opportunity to ask questions of the 3 presenters. Yes, Commissioner Cavanaugh, if you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you for your testimony, which is very insightful to our committee. And I'd like to hear from any of you that feels comfortable a little bit about how do you plan to reach out some of the mixed families? As we know, about 8 states in this northern part of the country compose the other border around the Lakes region. And we know that because of immigration and other causes, we have a scenario where many families have been decomposed and many families are now with mixed status. Is there a specific strategy that any of you can share with us as we try to consider that small group within the hard-to-count community?
So we're part of an initiative with the Leadership Conference for Human and Civil Rights, and this is an issue that we've discussed quite often. And while there's no one specific strategy, the approach that we believe will work the best is having credible messengers with credible messages that meets their needs, that addresses their fear, their concern, their motivations. And I'm going to say right now, I don't think that this is going to be at all easy, and it will be very localized. So what might work in Cook County will not work here in Franklin County or in Cuyahoga. So we're going to have to be very intentional and very deliberate in learning about what are the specific issues within neighborhoods and communities, and being able to craft and tailor those messages. Maybe it's with a child care provider, maybe it's with a local direct service provider of some sort, or a teacher, but that can share a compelling message that can encourage them to participate in the census.
To just add on that, I think that, I agree with what she just said. I think that it's important that there's partnership with the localities and the non-for-profits. It's really important because of the fact that everywhere is going to be different. There's going to be, something I didn't mention, and I think about a lot is also the faith-based organizations, and how to really connect with where people are, where do you find the mixed families, and what type of services or areas do people convene? Where is the area where people are, they trust the entity? So I think it is going to be a mixture, but it really depends on the location and who those contacts are.
I would just add to that I would echo the trusted messengers, whether it's through churches, through schools. I partner with a lot of direct service agencies and advocacy partners, and I think really beginning to test some of this early. Going into this summer, we need to be prepared, especially for just yesterday, the Supreme Court decision that was handed down, regarding immigrants and specific aspects of mandatory detention. I think we can look forward to another ruling from the Supreme Court, whether it's in May or June, that may also be adverse. But we need to get ahead of messaging that and communicating that within our communities in English and in Spanish, and making sure that we are providing the context to combat this fear. So.
Commissioner Tobin.
All right, I'm on. Okay, Dr. Naheda, around the U.S., we have states on the verge of losing a congressional seat. However, internally, they believe that the complete count, although I might not get the numbers to keep the congressional seat, they feel that that's enough. Can you tell, you mentioned earlier how you guys have lost congressional seats. Can you tell me there's a direct correlation between, obviously, the numbers and the seat, but can you tell me what you guys have suffered separately from losing the congressional seat? Because a lot of people attribute the influence, but it kind of stops there. Can you tell me what else is lost by not having those members in Congress?
Of course. So having those congressional seats is basically having a voice in national policy and funding allocation. And by Ohio losing, 30–40% of our seats over the last 40 years, I mean, that's diminished the voice in this state. And, you have to look at where the seats are being lost. Are they being lost in our urban areas? Are they being lost in our rural areas, suburban areas? I'd say all of them. And by denying that voice at the national level for a state, or being on the brink of further diminishing that voice, I mean, it could make the difference in, appropriations for, let's say, roads, bridges, children's programs. So, I mean, those are some of the things that I think that have been perhaps diminished, and we are at risk of losing in the future.
So if I can just get that clearly, while a complete count assures appropriate funding, there's that added influence means the real appropriate funding, the real money that could come additionally when in times of need, or and you're nodding, Mr. Ortiz. Can you expand upon that just a bit?
Yeah, I would just piggyback on what Dr. Naheda said with regard to, looking at that voice and having that representation. It also puts us in positions where you have an increase in particular in Ohio with gerrymandered districts that will pack urban areas so severely to where our congressional delegation for our state doesn't provide an accurate representation of the citizens who are counted. So I think in many ways it becomes very complex, and then impacts, again, the resources that are brought back into the state to combat issues at the core that really do start on concerns around poverty and funding for our safety net programs. So.
Thank you. Commissioner President Pauline Medrano.
Thank you. Mr. Ortiz, you mentioned getting ahead of the citizenship question, the confidentiality, the trusted voices. If I could hear from each of you, I mean, what's one thing that you're going to press upon that we could share with other folks as well? What are you going to press upon in your area?
Okay. This is something with different organizations that I'm involved in either a volunteer or work capacity, that we are really trying to grow the conversation, in particular with young Latinos, and really trying to make a push to where we are getting our community of trusted ambassadors that are already there to be more knowledgeable and to be, really organizers in charge of growing this conversation and making sure that we are taking it to the churches that we're involved in, taking it to the other clubs and social institutions that we're a part of, and trying to grow it organically, but also leveraging things like social media. I think we're hoping to maybe even do a Facebook Live after this commission testimony to get this message out there and to, make sure that we are, as multimodal as we need to be, looking at all sorts of platforms, and also knowing that, sometimes there's going to be digital divides in this state that are going to prevent that from being the only approach. So partnering with, Spanish language newspapers as well as radio is also a big part of that strategy.
Part of the work that Children's Defense Fund Ohio is doing is we've hosted from 25 of the Hard to Count census tract throughout the state, human-centered design thinking census solutions workshops, primarily to equip those individuals like the train the trainer model to go back to their communities. They are trusted messengers, they are trusted ambassadors, but to share what they know about the census and then also organize their own workshops within their neighborhoods, so that when I talked about earlier, what are the motivations, what are the compelling factors that can get people to participate in the census? These are the insights that we hope to learn from these sessions. And when I talk about, everything's local, right? So we need to know locally what matters to parents, to community members, that can really trigger something to get them to want to participate, see this as, part of their civic involvement. So that's something that we're doing also. But the other thing is, just from a practical matter, we've been telling people, listen, your census data is private for 72 years after the census. I'm not sure how much that's resonating, but that's something that we're telling people as well.
Just to get ahead of
the citizenship question, right?
And I'd like to add, I think in Chicago and in Cook County specifically, we're already starting outreach. So the fact that we're about less than a year away, we're really trying to drive that. We just had an election, and we're going to have another election in the next few weeks. Having those conversations with elected officials, right? And then in addition, I think that we're looking at, again, the innovative ways. So because we've already started, my office had already started mapping out in our district, and in other districts, we're pushing other commissioners to look at the mapping of where the hard-to-count populations, just based on 2010 data, really identifying and really start partnering up. So we're doing outreach events in those areas. And we're also looking at the possibility of how do we maybe partner up with schools, and how to really look into how to bring the education not only to the children, but also how do you engage the parents that are involved in the schools, and getting the information about all the concerns that they have, but also really driving home the message about why it's so important and why it's crucial for them to fill out the survey. So I think those are some of the strategies that we're starting on. We're seeing, it's been slow. Again, it's not going to be an easy thing. We don't expect it to be easy, but we need to not only rely. We know that specifically in Cook County and in Illinois, we're not going to get as much funding as we want. So we're doing things out of the box. We're not relying on when are we waiting for the money? One of the biggest things that we've seen is that there's been a big delay in Chicago. There's been a big delay in Cook County. There's been a big delay in Illinois because people still think, it's not 2020. But we're getting ahead of the game, and we're really not relying on funding. We're making sure that we're looking at innovative ways to reaching out to families.
I know that there's programs, there's Census in schools, so maybe to tap into those type of programs as well. Yes, Doctor.
And I'm glad that you mentioned schools as well and census in schools. So on April 1st is the National Census Day of Action. And one of the things that Children's Defense Fund and some of our partners are going to be doing is pushing out some of those classroom resources on social media to make sure that, teachers can, know that there's curriculum-aligned materials that they can use in their math classes, civics classes, to start getting children excited about the census and maybe talking to their parents about it as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner, State Representative Santiago, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but my question was answered just a couple minutes ago, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I know likewise Mayor Diosa's question was answered. Commissioner Tejada and then Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you very much. As you know, there's, and a lot of people's culture is get to the bottom line. How much is it going to cost? When's it going to start? When's it going to end? So in that context, particularly for 7th District Commissioner Anaya, but I welcome your input too from the other panelists. You mentioned about $2.5 million maybe it was being requested for Cook County alone, if I understood correctly. We have 110,000 people who are foreign-born in the county alone. Why that amount, and simple and as brief as you can describe it, so that and also because not all localities are the same. In Virginia alone, for example, we were telling the governor he was late in December when he established the Complete Count Commission, and we were telling him he was late in December. Allocated $1.5 million. He was asking that the legislature struck it, and now we have zero. So we have to come up with something. Why that amount? And briefly, we're almost preaching to the choir here, but it's important to try to condense that into telling people why. So I'd like to hear from you, Ms. Anaya, but then I'd also like to hear from other panelists why that amount in your particular jurisdictions. And I want to also thank you for coming all the way from your district, from Cook County, here to be here with us.
So the 2.5 was a random number, to be frank. Cook County had never done a complete count commission, so this was the first time. There were some negotiations with the president to see what money we had, and given that the biggest portion of Cook County was Chicago, so Chicago was going to be allocating a different amount. So Cook County just decided to pitch in $2.5 million from Cook County budget. Does not mean that that's the only money that's going to be going out there. We expect Chicago to have a big portion, and we are pushing legislation at the state level to look into $25 million, and there's two proposals, one of 25 and the other one is of 33. We don't know which one's going to pass, but we're looking at least $25 million for the whole state of Illinois. So that one was more allocated by the numbers by other jurisdictions. Specifically, there was one, I think that California used $2.50 per person, so they multiplied that, came up with $33,000. I know that they're negotiating, but the $2.5 million from Cook County specifically was just what they decided to chip in.
For Ohio, we're recommending about $2.5 to $6 million at the state level is what would be needed. And we looked at several different methodologies for how that was determined. So Ohio has about 11.6 million people in our population. So some states are doing, $1, $2 per person on a sliding scale with more resources, obviously going to hard to count communities. So we came up with a minimum of 2.5 million, with 6 million being a healthy appropriation.
Thank you.
I don't have anything to add.
Thank you. Commissioner Rodriguez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Are you absorbing this work to date, or is philanthropy helping any of you with this by funding your work?
For Children's Defense Fund of Ohio and the Ohio Census Advocacy Coalition, it's purely being funded by philanthropic organizations, the Annie Casey Foundation, Gunn Foundation, Columbus Foundation, and the Joyce Foundation. And, you know, it's not necessarily where it needs to be either. We're not like Michigan, where we've raised $5 million, you know, for the philanthropic community to do the complete count or to support it. However, you know, it's, I think, of vital importance to all our organizations at the state level and local level, so we're all committed to continuing this work.
Thank you. Commissioner, State Representative Tobin, to close.
Thanks again, Madam Chair. Okay. You mentioned your engagement of religious community, the religious community, that we know that a lot of the residents and undocumented tend to go there. But we also have knowledge that when they seek trusted sources, doctors and lawyers are trusted sources. How has that engagement been in your different communities, and how do you think that we could magnify that?
So for Cook County specifically, we have jurisdiction over our county health system. One of the ways that we're trying to engage is the chairman of our Cook County Health and Hospital System is going to be sitting on the complete count commission that the county has created. We think it's really important because specifically Stroger, which is our county hospital and its affiliates, we serve the hard-to-count communities majorly. So we're serving undocumented and immigrant population. We're serving low-income children. So we know that that is going to be an area where we really need to focus and emphasize the importance. So we're hoping that to continue those conversations and continue to see how the actual health system can become part of the process and engaging families with information, right, providing knowledge, but also how can they help find that trust, and how can they also advocate for the census in their own way. So, you know, I know that that's still in progress, but we're really looking at that as a really big portion, specifically for how Cook County is structured.
Well, one specific aspect with the recently arriving population from Puerto Rico is, I'm not sure, is this on? Okay. We have been convening multiple Bienvenidos groups. So there's distinct groups for Cleveland as well as for Lorain that are local coalitions of state agencies as well as other nonprofits, and making folks aware of different resources. I think this is something that increasingly is going to be a part of our messaging as we're reaching out and communicating with folks, is information on the census and making sure that that's something that can be shared with all the agencies at the table.
Thank you. At this time, I want to thank our esteemed first panelists. Thank you for your valuable testimony and for the time you took out to be able to be with us today to provide this very valuable information that will be included in our report. On our behalf, thank you. Let's give our first panel a round of applause. Thank you. As we take a moment to welcome our second panel to join us at the table in just a minute as we transition. As we welcome our second panelist to join us at the table, I'd like to introduce our two esteemed panelists that have joined us for this discussion. I'd like to begin by introducing Dr. Jonathan Benjamin Alvarado, my friend, Assistant Vice Chancellor and Professor of Political Science at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Welcome, Dr. Benjamin Alvarado. I would also like to welcome Ms. Kathy Kane Willis, Director of Policy and Advocacy, Chicago Urban League. Welcome to our commission hearing here. At this time, I'd like to begin by allowing Mr. Benjamin Alvarado to begin his presentation. Welcome, sir. It's good to see you again.
Good morning. morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Co-Chair Navarro and the rest of the panel. It's an honor for me today to be speaking before the National Latino Commission on the Census 2020 and the invitation from NALEO. I really deeply appreciate it. My name is Dr. Jonathan Benjamin Alvarado. I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Success and a Professor of Political Science at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. I am also the chairperson of the Nebraska Advisory Committee on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. But I'm here today in my capacity as a private citizen. I do not represent the University of Nebraska, nor should my comments be construed to be the official position of the University of Nebraska. But my testimony does represent that of a civically engaged scholar and educator with a keen interest in advancing the political, social, and economic well-being of Nebraska's Latino population. For the past 20 years, those interests have included the advancement of public education, Latino political representation and participation, the advancement of Latino civic engagement, Latino voter mobilization, the protection of Latino voting rights, the production of relevant public policy analysis for Latino issues writ large. So I'm here today to testify to the challenges facing the execution of a fair and accurate census count of Latinos in the state of Nebraska and across the Midwest in 2020. First, why is this important? In the 20 years between 1995 and 2015, the Latino population in Nebraska grew by over 300%, from little over 50,000 people to nearly 200,000 today. This was a rise of 3.1% of the state's total population to 9.2%. It's estimated to be nearly 11% today. I point this out because the U.S. Census projections in the mid-90s estimated that Nebraska's Latino population in the year 2015 would be 5%. We far outstripped that. More dramatically, there are pockets today in Nebraska, both urban and rural, where the percentages of Latinos residing in particular communities exceeds 60%, and where the Latino population in the public schools is in excess of 90% of all students enrolled. I would note that my own university, its #1 feeder school is Omaha South High School, which is a Latino minority high school. So it has had a dramatic impact for us in Nebraska. I note here that if you were to simply peruse the obituaries in Nebraska's largest daily newspaper, the Omaha World Herald, it would reveal to you a stunning reality. Almost without exception, the obituaries feature white elderly Nebraskans. But conversely, if you turn to the notice of births listing, a couple pages away, the entries are almost overwhelmingly Spanish surname. In fact, in 2017, the minority share of total population growth in the state of Nebraska was 95.4%. This alone requires an accurate census count, and it's imperative that it be both fair and equitable for the distribution of political representation that's already been mentioned this morning, and so that the return of resident tax dollar to Nebraska is correct to the penny. Allow me to deal what that means for the state of Nebraska. Because of issues of trust in government, the lack of cultural proficiency, and the potential language and technology barriers that have already been mentioned, one missed resident in a census count results in over $20,000 being lost over the next 10 years. If a household of 2.5 individuals is missed, that's $52,000 lost statewide in Nebraska. If the census count is off by 0.1%, this will result in a loss of revenue of over $400 million over the next decade. These are not insignificant amounts. Many of the families that we talk about has been previously mentioned, mixed status of citizen and both non-citizen individuals. The stakes are especially high for them, especially given the pernicious manner in which the U.S. immigration officials have used personal information of DACA and TPS residents to arrest, detain, and deport Latino residents in Nebraska with virtually no due process afforded to these individuals. Many of these individuals removed are the family's sole breadwinner. A series of raids and immigration sweeps in 2018 has driven many Latinos in our state into the shadows and underground, and has increased anxiety about any and all interactions with government. This is why the issue of trust is important. Trust is the product of reliability and confidence in a government entity demonstrated over time. So I submit the following recommendations for the best practices to mobilize the residents in the state of Nebraska for the 2020 census. In the context of pending legislation in the Nebraska legislature, I have strongly recommended, and my colleagues from the university have testified on our behalf, that any and all effort be undertaken by the state and federal government to assure that every Nebraskan is counted in the 2020 census. This specifically requires the development of state and county level complete count commissions that has already been mentioned. They are ad hoc voluntary commissions to identify possible challenges to a complete count, and they work diligently to find solutions so that every household is counted, including a count that is culturally competent, linguistically proficient, both in its outreach and marketing campaigns, specifically seeking to demystify the process, to build that trust that I mentioned, and to assure that the Latino community concerns regarding privacy and personal safety of all residents is protected. I should note that many of the neighboring states to Nebraska have already said yes to having complete count commissions, including Iowa, Wyoming, Colorado, and Missouri. Optimally, I would recommend that the idea of a complete count commission be taken up by the Census Bureau at a national level, with the idea of providing resources and expertise to all states so that there is a fair and accurate and equitable accounting of all persons residing in the United States. I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benjamin Alvarado. I'd like to now welcome Ms. Kathy Kane-Willis to provide her testimony. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Kane-Willis, and I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy for the Chicago Urban League, which is an African-American social service organization, but we also have a research and policy center, and that's where I work. The reason why I put this together is to demonstrate a report that we're going to release to leverage appropriations for the census, to make sure that the governor, the Speaker of the House understand how important the census is for Illinois. And, you know, we know that we're going to lose one seat, one congressional seat, possibly two. 16% of the state is hard to count according to the CUNY mapping tool, but according to Census, it's a little bit higher than that. For each undercounted person, it's at least $12,000 to $15,000 per decade in Health and Human Services funding alone. Health and Human Services funding alone, so, you know, for a family of four, you're talking about $60,000. And the distrust of the government is at an all-time high, especially the federal government. I mean, it is Illinois, so I'm not going to say that there's huge trust in the state government as well, because we've just been through quite a very difficult time with split governance and not having a budget for nearly 3 years, so a state budget. So one of the things that, and you probably can't see this very well, but one of the ways in which I think this could be useful, and there's all different kinds of ways to look at the data. You could look at the percentage. I rank this to the number of Latinos that were hard to count, and you can see that in Illinois, we rank 6th in the nation, and we have almost 700,000 Latinos that live in hard-to-count census tracts, which is nearly 1/3 of Latinos in the state. I did the same thing with African Americans. Again, Illinois ranks 6th in the nation, And more than 40% of African Americans live in hard-to-count tracts. And, you know, this is more than 800,000 people. For children, Illinois again ranks sixth in the country, but we're talking about a little less than 20% of children living in hard-to-count areas and just over 150,000 children. And just to drive home the point more, I also looked at places. And so you can see that of the top 100 largest places in the country, Chicago ranks third in the number of Latinos that are hard to count, with 60% of Latinos living in hard to count tracts, and that makes almost nearly 500,000 people, 480,000 people. It's a lot of people. For African Americans, it's again about 480,000 people. We rank third among large cities, and 60% of that population is hard to count, lives in hard to count tracts. For children, we rank second in the country with 66%, almost 67% of children living in hard to count tracts, and that's almost, as you can see, 585,000 people, so more than 500,000 kids living in hard-to-count tracts. These are data that I think can compel the General Assembly to appropriate money. We've done calculations, which was put into the Complete Count Commission's interim report, to determine what funding should be allocated. And instead of doing it by person and a number, we did the hard-to-count population and then determined an outreach strategy of the hard-to-count, the very hard-to-count, and the very, very, very hard-to-count, right? And based on that formula, we came up with an appropriation of about $25 million, which works out to be just conveniently $2 a person. But Illinois is very cash-strapped. That's a nice way to put it. And also, you know, we are a year out from our perspective. Oh my God, the census is happening right now. To the General Assembly, there's so many things that need to be funded after not having a budget for nearly 3 years. So it's really important to convey these statistics and convey how much money will be lost, which is like $1.2 billion in Health and Human Services funding alone. And additionally, we also have information on rural. We can't break it down this way, and Illinois is not that rural of a state. We have 11.3, I think, % population that live in rural areas, but there are also rural programs that are specifically funded by the census, and we can put that in the report as well. Some of the issues that have been happening, I'll just go to, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, children, Chicago. Sorry, this was children, 100,000. I said that backwards. Let me go previously. Did I do it? African Americans, and then kids. In Chicago, it's 55% of kids over 100,000. And then, so we believe that unless you make a big media splash, especially in Illinois, that we're not going to get any kind of an appropriation that's meaningful. Adding to the difficulties around the appropriation is, and the commissioner mentioned this, a number of competing bills. And they have sort of fallen along racial lines, with the Latino caucus supporting one piece of legislation and the African American caucus supporting another piece of legislation, which isn't at all complicated, not at all, to find a compromise between these two. But I think that right now, the appropriation of $1.5 million has been given out by the state. That was from last year. There is, Forefront is a funding collaborative for private money, so those grants have been, the RFPs have been released and the decisions will be made. Right now, everybody's working on with no funding. And what we want to do is create census centers. That means that any social service agency can educate people on the census and also provide resources to fill out the census. So we think of that as 3 different ways to engage in that work. Just giving out information, helping a client work their way through the census, and then third, providing dedicated space, especially for people who don't have access to the internet or who might have issues with it. We see this being done, the social service agencies can be trusted messengers in the community. But one of the things that we're really going to be working on is creating micro-targeted messages to determine barriers and reach hard-to-count populations. I don't think that we can emphasize how important, everybody's talked about that. That's really important. But one of the things that we want to be able to do is create these both train-the-trainer documents, materials, electronic materials, and handout materials that other agencies can drop their logos into. Because I know Chicago Urban League, who serves African Americans, is not going to resonate with the Latino community, nor is the Latino organization going to resonate in the African American community. Right now, this has been a very difficult thing because we all know what's at the end of this. We all know that the census represents money and power. And what comes after this? Redistricting. And so when you have a loss of African American population, an increase in Latino population, you're going to get this kind of dynamic. So we're also creating geographic maps for hard-to-count populations so that social service agencies can use them. We want to create materials for parents of young children and also talk about engaging nonprofit boards to get the business community involved. So those are our tactics. And since I am on the commission and I co-chair the Hard to Count subcommittee, just getting all of that information to the commission and then getting it out to all of the complete count committees. Am I going to say that this has been an easy or seamless process? No, it has not. It's been a very complicated process, and it remains complicated. I think that a year ago, we couldn't even get any bandwidth on the census for reporting except on the citizenship question, which is very important. But I must say that the underfunding of the census in general has been missed somewhat as a story. And so I think that's really important to communicate to our elected officials and to our communities. This is not a piece of paper. This is not just an internet form. This is your money. This is your power. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your amazing presentation. At this time, I'd like to provide our commissioners with an opportunity to ask questions of the 2 presenters. Yes, Commissioner Diosa, you recognize?
Good morning. So we are in Providence County where the dress rehearsal happened last year, and we, as my friend here, Representative Calistobon, described as disastrous. I think there's no other way to describe the whole process. But the biggest fear that we have is the citizenship question, right? And so as elected officials or people who are trusted voices, what is that message so that they can trust in filling out the form?
There's no easy answer to that. It's obvious that the environment in which we're operating right now is openly hostile to our immigrant Latino population in this country. And so that's why I kind of focused on the necessity of trust being integral to whatever messaging goes out, and it has to be very intentional, And I really applaud the effort of the different organizations that have already spoken about, the intent of its outreach into the community. But we have to be very careful now because of the what has been established in this country and what is going on right now, how do we assuage the fears of that community in a way that's going to allow them to feel confident that they can participate in this? You know, that's a much deeper question. And yet I think it's at the core of what we're all talking about here. It is about money. It is about power. It is about who gets the fair shake at the end of the day. And I feel really kind of, I want to be optimistic about it, but I also know that collectively we're going to have to put our best minds together and the best intention moving forward to ensure that the messaging that comes out of the Latino community, Latino media, and then, you know, the various social media platforms, that it really is integral and central to that particular message. This is important for lots of different reasons, and how we communicate it through schools, through curriculum, through other public institutions is going to be vitally important as we kind of roll this out. But, you know, this is the challenge. Thank you.
Can I piggyback on that question really quick? Yes. I think that it's really important for people who are concerned about the citizenship question to know that if they do not fill out the census, they're more likely, they're going to have somebody come to their house. And so if the concern, you know, the concern of someone coming to your house, if it's ICE, whatever it is, filling out the census preemptively as soon as you get it is the best way to, and completely, is to ensure that there isn't follow-up to your house. You know, we can cite the code that protects census information and just hammer home that point. I hate to say that, you know, there have been a lot of media stories that suggest that there have been looks at sharing this information. Currently, it's protected under the law, but I think that one of those messages is to say, fill out the census so no one comes calling. I mean, but that could happen, and that could be very scary.
Thank you. Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your testimony. My question is addressed to Dr. Alvarado, and it has to do with making sure that we have on the record your ideas or your input in regards to the technology barriers as we see more Latinos moving out of the urban metro areas into suburban regions, specifically as far as labor is concerned. We know that we have large numbers of Latinos that are involved in the agricultural sector. And, you know, many of our economies depend on that workforce to make sure that the crops are successfully collected. What would you recommend, or what are some of your concerns specifically as we try to reach out to these suburban and labor in regards to technology challenges?
Well, you know, it's interesting to me because one of the things that's grown in parallel to the Latino population in the state of Nebraska is Latino media. So television and radio has been something that we have been pleasantly surprised to see. And those have been the most reliable kind of portals for information to be disseminated into the community. And especially in the state of Nebraska, where we saw the dismantling of the meatpacking industry in Omaha that's now spread across the entire state in pockets, like in the cities of Columbus and Lexington, where the vast majority of population growth in those cities has been almost exclusively Latino. You know, and, you know, I just think it's ironic that we have floods in Nebraska right now because 53 municipalities have been directly impacted. Half the counties in the state are now being impacted. And how's that money going to come to the state? It's going to be based upon the census. These are also counties where we've seen a significant decline in the rural population, and the only growth has been through the kind of redistribution of Latinos from the urban area out to these more rural locations. And so I know we're going to rely heavily on Spanish language radio, and to a lesser extent television, because there's only really a couple of other TV outlets in the state. I know the Latino Commission in the state of Nebraska uses them a lot to kind of get information out. And I'm hopeful that, you know, we've got individuals working on the ground who are contemplating this. But like I said, you know, this is important because if we don't do this correctly, it has a significant impact. And we're going to see the impact in Nebraska now that we've had this natural disaster as to what kind of federal funds will be able to come to the state of Nebraska, and if it's going to be commensurate with the need of people in those communities. Because guess what? It didn't discriminate.
Thank you. President Medrano.
Thank you. Ms. Kane Willis, I'm interested in examples of your target messengers. Give me an example.
Targeted messaging. So it might be specifically if you're talking about children, and we're planning on doing focus groups. Like I said, everything's unfunded, and so some things are very difficult to do right now without funding. But one of the things that parents of young children, we can talk about the things that motivate people, and what we've found is, breaking it down to the individual amount that's lost is really important. But if I put health and human services costs, for example, special education money might be something that I would include for African American populations, but maybe parents of young children might not find that a compelling stat, a compelling message. So we want to make sure that we test the messages with that population to make sure that we're not giving them information that's bite-sized and resonates with them. We know, for example, teachers are not as trusted as lunch ladies. I mean, yeah, but early childhood education, Head Start programs are trusted. So, and faith-based groups are trusted. So it's about getting to these groups, and we're planning on having World Cafes where we work on these messages, starting with focus groups and then refining them. So I can only guess at what they will be, but I want to be sure that we're communicating a message that resonates with the population that we're targeting. And it might be about sliding them around, roads are probably not going to resonate with, parents who kids go to Head Start programs, but roads and bridges and infrastructure would resonate maybe with our board, And so those are the kind of micro-targeting messages that we're thinking about. And then the trusted messengers. Like I said, the lunch lady rather than the teacher. The librarians are very trusted too.
That's what I wanted to get. Instead of just education, you're narrowing it down to, the most common denominator.
That's what we're thinking about, because here's, and I haven't tested this, but special education can go either way, especially among African Americans, like, oh, that's where you put people, or, oh, that's a service my child receives. And so we have to be very careful with those line items, but we know that we have to sort of name some of them, and see what resonates with each of these groups.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Tobin, and then Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you. I'm going to have a question now. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Your mic was off.
Yeah. Is it not? Okay. So this question is for Dr. Alvarado. So there are Latinos in the fields, as you stated earlier. I've been trying to figure out correlations as to if these Latinos, because primarily Latinos in the fields, if they weren't doing this work, and let me just preface that by saying you talked about being intentional. And a lot of things get done due to fear in this country. And I always say NASA wouldn't be around if Sputnik had not gone up, right? And so when we talk about intentional, I'm thinking, what is the cost that we as Americans save because the Latinos are doing this work that nobody else wants to do? And if we could figure out that difference, then how do we spread that message across? Because I want to say your oranges are going to not cost $1 but $2, your lettuce, your corn. I'm trying to figure out ways where we can put the scare tactic in to everybody in America to let them know that the value of the minority communities is much greater than what they see up front, but what their cost of living is. And then I'll follow that up with a question later for you, Ms. Kane Willis. But do you have anything that you can speak to that, or how do we phrase that? In
Nebraska, we had really good examples of this when In the 1980s, when the decision was made to break up meatpacking in Omaha, Nebraska, you have to remember at that period of time, it was a union job. Okay, second and third generation Eastern and Southern European immigrant families could make $18 an hour with full union benefits, including retirement. And in so many instances, this was something that allowed those families to leverage the well-being of their entire family, their children able to go to college, so on and so forth. Well, ironically enough, today, some 30 years later, the best wage that you could possibly earn in meatpacking is about $15 an hour with little, if any, benefits whatsoever. Okay, the average lifespan of a worker working in meatpacking today, because the speed of production has increased exponentially just over the course of the last 30 years, is about a year and a half. Turnover about 90% on an annual basis. So you got to continuously be refreshing that labor pool in order to meet the demands of the American market. I like to tell people that, you know, if we really paid the true cost of a hamburger at McDonald's, it would be more like $7 or $8, but we don't, because it's significantly subsidized by low-wage, low-skilled labor that's provided predominantly by immigrants and refugees in the state of Nebraska. That doesn't resonate with people because guess what? They're still getting their hamburger for $2.25 or $2.50. And so it's problematic in that regard, and I wish that there was some other way that we could kind of let people know. And in addition to the fact that this is very inhumane work. You know, we've gone back to the future. The Jungle, when it was written at the turn of the previous century, is really not all that different. You know, we've had lots of people come into Nebraska and do research on this, and really the conditions, you know, perhaps may be better because there's less infection, but people are no less, you know, injured and out of the workforce in a very short period of time. And, you know, and it was originally the remedy for the loss of farm income during the farm crisis in the 1980s. Well, we'll move meatpacking out to your rural community. This will provide good jobs for people. But guess what? Those people didn't last. And this is what caused this influx. And so in many of those communities, there's this, you know, it's the devil you don't want, but it's the devil that I have. You know, the only jobs that are provided in the community, the only thing that keeps those communities alive is labor that's employed through those entities. You know, and there's a big debate right now because I think, I forget if it's Sam's Club or one of those big mega companies wants to open a chicken factory in Fremont, Nebraska. Well, that's not going to happen because the whole property just got flooded. And they'll have to come back and think about that again. But this is a story that just keeps on turning itself over. And I wish I had a better answer for you, but I think that's a really sterling example of how difficult this is to get people to understand the centrality and the importance of immigrant labor to helping America live the way that it lives, and not having to even take into consideration the cost that's implied, the human cost to people who work in those industries, but also the profits that are being extracted by the people who own those companies.
So I just want to just say with that, you know, Jesus was not popular in his hometown, right? His popularity was outside of Jerusalem. Then he had to come back. I think it's important that outside of Nebraska and around Main Street America, this message may resonate because we can tell your cost of living can double overnight if this wasn't the case. And I'm just, again, I think that we need to be strategic. We need to be intentional. We need to figure out how to drive this message and engage, you know, even and I think the fear tactic is more about rural and suburban America than urban America, because yes, we want to get a complete count, but it's almost a fight between urban and rural. And the rurals think, well, we can't keep giving them things. But they don't see that it's either an upward spiral or downward spiral. So either we're circulating money and retaining or gaining population, or we're losing population, losing money, and that means losing influence, and their tax dollars aren't going to go far enough. So I'll follow that up with my question later. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Ms. King-Willis, business in my recollection, and how you're using nonprofits as a strategy to reach business leaders, and I wonder if you could expand on that for the record.
Well, this is our plan. This is our idea, is to create webinars based on our own, what we're doing right now is starting preliminary focus groups within the Chicago Urban League to train our staff to find out what the barriers are, who the messengers are within our own organization, right? And then we're going to create a census center within our organization. Part of that is to reach out to our boards. A lot of nonprofit boards have businesses on them, and it's really important to see if we can get some of these boards to commit to branding with the census or contributing money or getting the messages out through either employee engagement programs. That's one way to do it. There's a number of different ways. So we thought that that's an easy way to get tentacles out into the business community. We did have on the Complete Count Commission someone who represented the business community, but they unfortunately resigned. So this was the way that we had kind of thought about doing that. And since there is not, you have your Complete Count Commission and you have the Complete Count committees, but there's not a great way of, at least at this moment, we have a list of the Complete Count committees that's been provided to us by the census. But there's no contact information. So I have somebody from, downstate that calls me and says, I want materials, trainings, how do I get involved? There's something happening in your area, but I don't know who to send it to. And I don't know if this is by design, by incompetence, by a combination of both, by government shutdown. So, but I think that if we are able to do this, and I hope that we really are, that we get the funding that we're to be able to do this, then we can train other organizations. It will have a big effect.
Co-chair?
Can I say one thing about the rural population? One of the things that we were going over with was an appropriations bill that didn't specify the rural population. We think that's very important because we have to be all in. It's about equity of counting everyone. Mm-hmm. And, I got quite a bit of a hard time from an African-American legislator who was like, the Chicago Urban League cares about rural people. And it's like, no, we care about an accurate count because an accurate count affects all of Illinois. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Of course.
Follow-up. We experienced floods in Colorado several years in 2013, and I used that as a very persuasive point to try to engage them in census work, some of our county leaders. But our Latino population in those counties suffered disproportionately because they primarily had the option of trailer housing, which is considered personal property under real estate code and not real property. And so they were not eligible for the FEMA replacement programs. There's so much in disaster relief that's census related and other public policy issues that there's a lot to work with.
That was the reason that I raised that point, because I think we're already confronting that. I serve on a couple nonprofit boards in the community that are doing direct work with on the disaster, and we've come to the realization that even the FEMA money is not even going to scratch the surface of what's going to be needed in those communities, and we're significantly damaged, and we're concerned that they may never be able to rebound, because they've already been in a depressed state for an extended period of time. And so it's very worrisome for folks in Nebraska. And as these people disperse and do not come back to the community, we're going to probably miss a lot of those people as well. So it's a double whammy in that regard.
I agree.
Thank you. Commissioner Santiago and then Commissioner Tejeda. Tejada.
For clarification, and the other one, Ms. Kane-Willis, you mentioned in your testimony, and it may have just been conversational, but I want to make sure I understand, that the message could be fill out the survey or else someone will come see you. And I wonder if that type of message, and then I'll let you elaborate or clarify, it could be counterproductive to the cause, because we should assume that if the citizenship question survives and is on there, that would hurt your cause, wouldn't it? We should be delivering the message of the positive or the protections that people have.
Well, I only say, yeah, see, I think that's, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I think that it's important to talk about the positives. And when you talk about Latinos and African Americans, even though their distrust is high in the federal government, they also, according to the barriers, attitudes study, show that they realize that there's the most to gain from them filling out the census. I only say that because it's come up as, can nonprofits say, don't fill out the, when we can't, right? And so if people are afraid of someone coming on their door, there is follow-up that will happen if the census isn't filled out. That's a reality. So I'm not saying that it should be the front messaging, but maybe, and I'm not working on Latino messaging specifically, but I do think that if people are very afraid, and I mean, we're a sanctuary state, and, I live in a sanctuary city, so it might not be the same kind of thing, but I think it is still an issue, that if you don't want government people coming to your door, then filling out the census is a good thing to do. Aside from all the other good things, right? Like, it's a really good thing to do, but if you want to ensure that there isn't follow-up to your community, to your household, then doing it online, calling it in, mailing it in, whatever it is probably the best course.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Chair, one follow-up from Mr. Navarro. Mr. Alvarado, I apologize. I want to make sure I didn't put words in my head on your testimony. You related to something about being inhumane, and I took it as, did you say that the fast food industry is inhumane work? Or can you elaborate or clarify what you were saying?
What I was talking about is that there's been numerous studies that have been done on the health and well-being of workers in the meatpacking industry. And something that's occurred over the course of the past 20 years with increasing mechanization and a speeding up of the line of processing, beef, that many people working in those, more often than not, because of the working conditions, because of the speed of the line, suffer repetitive motion injuries. They suffer injuries on the floor. They're cut. And in many instances, because the companies themselves, has a doctor or a nurse on site, but they don't receive adequate health care. And many of these people, emerge from the process literally scarred for life, unable to do any other kind of work because they have come down with something. And so over the course of time, like I said, this is why we have to have continuous kind of replenishing of that labor pool because of the inhumane conditions. I mean, everybody knows this going in. The kill floor is 32 degrees. This is conditions that people work in, subjected to working in there 8 hours a day, obviously, so that there's not bacteria as meat's being processed. Is there a better way? I don't know. But I do know that when I have read these studies, that it's appalling to think that, we haven't progressed as a society in a way that protects the workers' well-being. And that's what I was referring to.
Commissioner Tejada?
Thank you, Chair. Our colleague, Commissioner David Santiago, already touched on one of the comments that I was going to focus on that Ms. Kane Willis had made. And with regards to avoid someone coming and knocking on your door if you don't fill out the census form, I got to tell you, some of us have grassroots on tenant organizers, low-income tenants, and it's so hard to get them to be proactive. And then when there is a displacement notice, all of a sudden there's major organizing going on because they're reacting to something. So we are naturally reactive. So thank you for the micro targeting messaging that might work. And and so we are looking at all kinds of messages that might motivate our community in different areas of the country. It might work in some places, it might not work in some other areas, but we are willing and to consider anything that might work in its appropriate form, whether it's in English or in Espanol or however the case may be. The other comment that I want to focus on was on Dr. Benjamin Alvarado's comment on that you made regarding on something that goes maybe to the high level of anxiety many people in the United States are feeling, and that is that you referenced something to the effect that in the Nebraska newspapers, the obituaries are mostly of white Americans that are passing away, whereas in future pages later, in the newly born, Latino surnames appear. And that goes both to the graying of America and the browning of America that makes many people highly anxious, I'll use that word. And so it's the root of a lot of things that are going on in the country today. So my question is, in that context, because Nebraska is not alone on that, it's happening throughout the country. What do you say to those folks that may feel that anxiety and say, you know, what's in it for you if we have a complete, fair, and accurate count? What's in it for you? You partially answered a little bit of that and some of your prior question, but I think I'd like to focus on that specifically. What could you share to alleviate that anxiety that some of those folks may feel?
You know, I'm a political scientist by training, and one of the things that I think disappoints me more than anything else over the course of the last 25 years or so has been the lack of efficacy of many elected officials in this country to effectively communicate what's at stake for their constituents on an ongoing basis. In other words, to kind of lay out for them, you know, if there is indeed a graying and a browning of America going on simultaneously, what does that look like? And I think that they've done the American public a disservice by allowing, you know, the most strident voices of opposition to dominate that discourse. They haven't done anybody any favors. All it does is creates a toxic environment, mistrust and fear, and I think that's what's driving a lot of people. I mean, all you got to do is pay attention to the media for about a half an hour and you realize that everything's being driven by the fear of something. The fear of being, we will not be replaced, that type of rhetoric. And I think it's rather disappointing in that regard because I think this could have been a moment, especially given the pervasiveness of social media and the different technological platforms that we now enjoy, to really kind of get the word out as to what's going on. You know, I face it on a daily basis. People say, oh, but you're Latino. And I said, hey, you know what? And I represent the Wavefront. There's a lot coming behind me. And they're going to have the same skills and competencies that I do. And they're going to have the same dedication to our well-being, to the common weal, as they like to say, to the benefit of all, not just to me and my family. I think, you know, I like to tell people in the state of Nebraska, I serve all Nebraskans. I don't just serve the brown Nebraskans. And I think that that's the messaging that has to happen, and it hasn't. And that's one of my deep disappointments in American society today, that we've allowed the political discourse to be commandeered, you know, and to allow people who don't have the best interests of all Americans at heart. You know, it's me versus we, and I think that that's unfortunate. And I think that, you know, more has to be done in that particular arena. But I want to thank you for asking that question, because it's one of the things that keeps me up at night.
Thank you. This is obviously a work in progress, but it is at the heart of a multitude of, if we're going to have a true democracy, this is one of the pillars of the democracy, that if we are going to have a complete count, it has to be of all people. And so thank you for raising that critical issue.
Thank you. So this question is from Ms. Kane-Willis. We spoke about a few things earlier, and we talked about engagement. I just want to say, in Rhode Island, there's this notion in the suburbs and rural area that the urbans get too much already. So forget it, you know, or as they will say, screw it, right? And what I tell them, and what I try to, you know, after everything that I've been through in Aleo to date and everything that I've learned, it's if you think you're paying a lot of taxes now, wait till we lose a seat and wait till we don't get a complete count. And so with that said, we know Chicago and Illinois has been through a lot in the last few years because of the budget and because of the, you know, it's a lot of money moves through it, but it doesn't mean that you guys keep it. And so, and I think that's the determinative of wealth, right? It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And so with that said, as I mentioned, spirals up, spirals down earlier, when you guys suffer that loss, when we don't get that complete count, and if you already do not have the adequate resources, how do we tell people that now you're going to have less money and you're still going to have the same problem. And so where do you grab from now? What do we do if you were in that, hypothetically, if you were in that scenario, what would you do with the same problem and less resources?
So, I mean, one of the things that what would I do with that? Well, one of the things that I would do to message is to talk about, appropriating money for organizations to count people, to do the groundwork, represents a huge return on your investment that you are unable to achieve in the state of Illinois any other way. So it is about, saying if we lose this money, we're still going to have the same problems and we're not going to have the money. How are we going to make anything work? And like I said, there's a lot of competing interests in Illinois right now. So I think you have to kind of scream it from the rooftops that if you do not invest as very little, I mean, $25 million is real money, right? I'm not going to lie. But $1.2 billion in health and human services funding is a lot bigger and realer money. So I think that we have to do it just in an ROI, your return on your investment, invest this, and this is what you get, and actually create a multiplier for it. Let me write that down. and then tie it to the census. But I mean, rural areas get money too. Everybody gets money from the census.
But it's become a competition. In regards to this, and I always tell people that one of the issues that I have at home is that we get scholars after the fact. We get people who analyze the hell out of things after the fact. It's too late. And so I think we have to work backwards. We have to say, this is going to happen. Look, we're on this trend. And so what I'm getting at is that how do we raise those alarm bells where we say, let's not wait, which this is what we're doing here, right? Now, Leo has taken it up, and we're working hard to make sure that this doesn't happen. But I guarantee you books will be written about and published, scholars will talk about what we could have done to avoid this. I'd rather they'd be out of business 10 years from now because this didn't occur. And so how do we get that out there? Because we need to talk about doomsday is right now.
You just inspired me. I have long been an advocate of more, broader Latino political participation. And obviously the most reliable vehicle that I know of is the GOTV door-to-door networking that occurs. Why don't we adopt GOTC? Let's get out the census. Why don't we start going door to door and spreading information and the kinds of very specific micro messaging that we're going to have to share with our community? That's trusted, promoters. How like we've done it with healthcare. Like we've done it with voting. It's a door-to-door, trusted individuals, could be from faith communities, could be from our local nonprofits. But, and for many of them, yeah, we're going to have to pay them. But guess what? There's a lot at stake if we don't. And I think you've made a very clear point of that. We don't want to be doing the postmortems. I don't want one of my fellow political scientists to be talking about the failure of the 2020 census because of reasons X, Y, and Z. We already know what they are. So if we're going to sit and passively watch it, then it's going to be on us as well. So I applaud the effort of Naleo to get out ahead of this, but I do think that we have to be a lot more, as I stated earlier, intentional. And if we do have vehicles, things that we know work in engaging the Latino population and other immigrant populations around the country, let's do it. And I think that there will be people, if you tell them that I can guarantee we're going to get a more accurate census count, people will fund it.
I think also you can find indigenous leaders among, to get out the count, right? Like you can use professional organizers, but this is about a specific community sometimes, an area that somebody knows. And sometimes that could be a stipend, to do door knocking because that window is going to be really small. It's not like registering voters and then getting out the count. And I had to explain that to an organizer. It's not like there's a census that we can start on in the fall. So there's not, it starts when it starts. And so we have to, educate people and then we have to engage them in it. And it's a very short window that we really have. And so getting to those indigenous leaders, I think, is really important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I wanted to thank you and also add a couple of things. Particularly, I do believe this effort is boots on the ground, very surgical. The way we know as elected officials know how to do this, going door to door, and it's even within a census block. You have to bifurcate areas within that block that and find those specific people in those neighborhoods in the hard to count areas within the block to go to that area of the census block. So it's going to take a lot of not just us elected officials. It's going to take your regular Jerry down the street who's lived in the neighborhood 40 years, and he's already helping me, at least in my neighborhood, which is unincorporated. So we got to find those people, catalog those people. I think, like you said, Ms. Kane-Willis, which is, and I want to talk a little bit more about this, which is, the cafeteria lady. I do believe we do have to, for the messaging piece and who to go to piece, we have to catalog those trusted voices in categories. If it's the cafeteria lady, if it's the librarian, if it's your healthcare provider, within the healthcare provider, who is the most trusted person. And that is the work that I know focus groups are doing. But for us, as we deliver this message, we need to know who I need to find in my neighborhood. And specifically, we have not talked about this here, and I know this issue has come up in the past regarding the first responders. Are the trusted voices first responders, and the issue of that in certain neighborhoods, particularly in minority, hard-to-count populations, how are we going to overcome that? For example, in my neighborhood, police are very liked. I see them, I stop them, they're there, they're doing neighborhood policing, and I know that's a concept that works, but many people in certain communities resent that. And so how do we overcome that, knowing that they're the closest probably unit out there in communities, as they're the eyes and ears?
In Chicago, for example, in minority communities, well, minorities are the majority of Chicago, in Black and Latino communities, the police are absolutely not trusted. And so, and because of the high arrest rates among communities of color for, being communities of color, I'm just going to say that, because of racism, it also makes it harder for people with criminal records can't apply for these census jobs, right? So the police are absolutely not trusted messengers in our neighborhoods, in the neighborhoods that we represent. So it might be actually the person who used to be in a gang and now does violence prevention work, because they know everybody in the neighborhood. It could be the block club, because they know everybody. It's not gonna be who we think it is in terms of government folks. It could be the mail carrier might be okay. Firefighters might be better than police, but the police in Chicago, no. Yeah.
And I think we should use that information to leverage who we identify, and then obviously have conversations with, because we need to leverage their support, whether it's in Miami-Dade, the firefighters union chief, and the work that he's going to have to do to carry this, because we're not going to be able to go to police in certain neighborhoods. And that, I think that's the conversation within our first responders that we have to really address. So with that, I want to thank each of you for your time and your very valuable testimony to the commissioner. It was good to see you, and thank you for being here with us. Let's give them a round of applause. As we transition, I would like to ask our third panel to join us at the table as soon as possible. I'd like to welcome our third panelist to the table, Mr. William Gonzalez, Executive Director, SEVA, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Welcome. And Ms. Rosa Talk, Interim Executive Director, Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs. Unfortunately, at the last minute, we were not able to be joined by Ms. Miriam Acevedo Davis, who unfortunately had an unanticipated challenge, and she sends her regrets. At this time, if the panelists are ready, I'd like to welcome you both, and Ms. Talk, if you would like to begin.
I know we're almost at time, and I'm hoping we can all stay. And I'd love an opportunity at the end to kind of reflect if there's time, and I just want to put that out for your consideration and subject to everybody's schedules. Thank you.
I know we're on a timeline, and the presenters are going to present, and some of us have to leave for flights, but we will make every effort to be able to accommodate that and record the testimony. Commissioner, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, commissioners, and hello, members of the audience as well. Thank you for inviting the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs to testify in this important hearing today. My name is Rosa Toc, and I am the Legislative and Policy Director focused on health affairs for the Council. I'm very honored to be here and share and learn with you. MCLA is a state agency. We are one of 3 ethnic councils for the state and part of the executive branch. Like the Ohio Latino Affairs Commission, our legislative mandate directs us to advise and inform the governor's office and the state legislator about pressing issues that are relevant to Latino communities. Many of those were already mentioned previously. As such, we are following and working closely on the efforts to ensure the complete enumeration of Latinos in Minnesota. Since the last census, the Latino population in Minnesota has increased 18.5%, and we are now almost 300,000 Latinos, representing 5.3% of the total population. The 5 main Latino groups in the state are of Mexican, Puerto Rican, Salvadoran, Ecuadorian, and Guatemalan origin. And as you can see on the slide, we are pretty much dispersed all over the state, particularly in rural areas, but also in the core center in the Twin Cities metro area. As my previous panelists were mentioning, we are a very young population. In 2017, 32.4% of Latinos was 14 years of age or younger, and the median age for the Latino population in the state is 24 years, while it's 38 years for the total population in the state. So as they were mentioning, the population is aging, the mainstream population is aging, Latino population is growing and is young. So in Minnesota, we pride ourselves to be on the top rankings for economic, education, health, and civic life achievements in the country. However, Minnesota is also consistently ranked as having the 2nd worst racial disparities in the country. Compared to their white counterparts, people of color and indigenous fare much lower in education outcomes, wealth accumulation, access to quality health care, or employment, while their incarceration rates are higher. So a complete effort in the state of Minnesota is very important for our communities. And although the state had the 2nd highest male participation rate in the country for the 2010 census, the response rate was not the same throughout the state, and like everywhere else, and others had mentioned, it missed communities of color and low-income people. So I would also echo each one of the concerns already stated here. They are very similar in Minnesota regarding how to make sure to have a complete enumeration of Latinos. So in addition of the budget reductions, a challenge that we now face is that the Bureau, the Census Bureau, reduced its presence from 8 locations that were all over the state to only 3 offices in the Minneapolis area, Rochester, and Duluth, so central, north, and south. So from 8 locations to 3 offices. And on top of that, we are at risk of losing 1 congressional district in 2022. In Minnesota, we might miss at least 24,000 Latinos in hard-to-count tracts. Some of them are showed there on the map with the orange arrows. And of course, that will translate into millions of dollars in federal funds lost and putting at risk perpetuating those disparities I mentioned before. So in the face of these historic and new challenges, Minnesota is trying to be creative and innovative. Since these new challenges, the reduced funds, the citizenship question, the fear and anxiety because of the current anti-immigrant rhetoric and concerns about data confidentiality, since all these challenges affect multiple cultural and linguistic groups, the new advocacy and our awareness efforts are now multicultural in nature. And this time around, the philanthropic sector stepped in very early in 2018 and is playing a major role. The state also established its complete count committee in June of 2018, so we tried to be early on in this game. So the Minnesota Council on Foundations helped form a large cross-cultural and cross-sector coalition, the Minnesota Census Mobilization Partnership, where government, community groups, businesses, and philanthropic agencies are organized to advocate, promote, and provide funding to support the complete count efforts. The state demographer's office has a state-level staff already prepping local governments and encouraging them to form their own complete count committees. So what are some recommendations or promising practices from Minnesota? First of all, and I think that many of my previous colleagues mentioned that, it's that we need an authentic community engagement. So this mobilization partnership I was referring to has now completed a Minnesota-specific messaging campaign to mobilize residents and boost participation. Under the theme, Our Minnesota Census, this plan is a community-led, centered, and driven framework. More than a traditional communications framework, the plan recognizes that community engagement and ownership are critical for a successful, complete, and safe count strategy. The implementation of this outreach plan has 4 phases. The first one is going to start in April. And the mobilization partnership is also envisioning providing legal assistance to protect vulnerable communities. And the second one is around strategic legislation and investments. Currently, there is a piece of legislation that would amend a section of the Fair Campaign Practices Act to allow census workers to access residential facilities like apartment buildings, college dorms, and nursing homes. Our current governor, Governor Walz, has just recommended $1.6 million in one-time funding to support activities through the State Demographer's Office to encourage participation, especially in historically undercounted communities. So those investments are going to be targeted to increase response rates from households with PO boxes in rural Minnesota through the state's demographer's office. Also, to make it easy and affordable for community partners to bring the census to historically undercounted communities by providing community tabling kits that might be Wi-Fi hotspots, tables, instructions, educational and promotional brochures, etc., for the local complete count committees to host census response events. Also, translation of promotional resources and translation in services, and grants to support census organizing and mobilization activities operated by local governments and community organizations. So, as you see, the challenges we face are significant, especially when we're talking about a pretty big state. And too much is at stake to ensure fair representation and fair share of federal funds to Latinos across the state. So our success will depend on how effectively the government and the nonprofit sector can partner with communities of color and indigenous to reach out effectively in order to ensure a complete count. As a state agency serving Latinos in the state, we are committed to play our role as an information and education hub, partnering with community to support this plan. Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much.
Buenas tardes. Gracias por la oportunidad. For you giving us Will Gonzalez, the Executive Director of SEBA. SEBA is an organization in Philadelphia's Latino community. Our mission is to promote the economic development and financial inclusion of the Latino community through collaborations and advocacy aimed at ensuring their access to quality housing. Before I talk about the challenges facing Philadelphians for a fair and accurate Census 2020 count, I want to talk more quickly about the recommendations or best practices to mobilize people to participate in the Census 2020. And I want to start by echoing and expanding on the comments that Ms. Katie Cain Willis made from the Chicago Urban League. You know, we need to do all of the above and all hands on deck approach to this. We got to think outside of the box, and we have to be very localized and very focused. You know, best of all, in terms of Philadelphia, we have a complete count committee. It started a full year ahead of what we did the last time. In terms of timeliness, I think in terms of effectiveness as well, it has a great composition of nonprofit leaders and business leaders and also influencers. It made an investment in terms of people. It has 2 full-time staff people and many other volunteers, et cetera. I think we need to be concerned, however, in Philadelphia, because although Philadelphia has a complete count committee, the surrounding suburbs do not. And that's a big challenge, especially when you consider issues of displacement and gentrification that are taking place in Philadelphia and making some of our people move out into the counties. I think in terms of that challenge, we need to use the economic analysis approach and make people understand that it's in their self-interest to have these complete count committees and to do an all-hand-on-deck approach and all of the above approach. For example, a 1% undercount in Pennsylvania would mean over $500 million lost over the next decade. I'm sorry, would mean $400 million annually for Pennsylvania, and for Philadelphia, that would be about $500 million over the full decade. So there's a cost associated with this, so it's important to make that investment. You get a return on the investment, and I like the idea of creating a multiplier and figuring out what that is for every dollar invested and making sure that people get counted. What does that mean, translate into money? An all hands on deck, all of the above approach means that it has to be multilingual, not only in English and Spanish, but also in Spanglish, and that we also need to meet the needs of other limited English proficient populations. But even when you talk about very localized, we know very well from speaking the language that the Spanish from one country is somewhat different than the other, and it's not that they're a different language, it's just that you can connect better with people if you're speaking similar and using similar acentos, etc. I think the important thing to do too is use trusted institutions. And Philadelphia, we're blessed with very strong nonprofit community, and we did the analysis, and for every dollar invested in a Philadelphia Latino nonprofit, $6 are generated for the economy. So if little nonprofits can do this economic analysis and show where the return on the investment, we hope that some of the local colleges, and we're working with them on that, and some of the other institutions can figure this out. We need to have churches involved as well. We need to remember the Jesus census story out of Luke and see how we can try to get people involved in that, the churches involved. Businesses, big and small, from the bodega to the health insurance company. You know, one of the main things of the census is also data, and business rely on data. So without that data, how good are the business analysis going to be? So we need to make them aware of that. We need to also make them aware of the circulation of money. So for example, in Pennsylvania, $39 billion was received in total program obligations from the federal government, $17 billion for Medicaid, $5 billion for federal direct student loans, $2.7 billion for SNAP. So supermarkets should be concerned, right? I think we also need to adopt a circus carnival atmosphere around the census. Yes, we need to use social media. Yes, we need to do the traditional ways of outreach, large media too. But we need to follow some of the concepts of la pedagogía del oprimido, where you use teatro del oprimido, where you use teatro invisible y teatro foro. What's teatro invisible? Teatro invisible is two actors get on a bus. They're the only ones on the full bus that know they're actors, and they're acting out a skit about the census. When one of the bus passengers gets home, le dice a la esposa, hey, mira lo que hoy en la guagua hay dos tipos hablando de algo. You know, so you could have that type of influence. It's called guerrilla marketing for those who do it in the private sector. In those teatro foro, you can go to captive audiences, GED classes, English as a second language. These are some of the techniques that have been used in Philadelphia on other issues, and which we hope we can use for this. I think also the arts need to be involved. Fiesta, música, raps, murals, that's going to be used in Philadelphia. I hope that Naleo can leverage their power to talk with Univision and Telemundo to see if census awareness are product placed in Telemundo and Univision programming. You know, they product place little cans of soda. Can we product place in some of their shows socially responsible messages about the census? Digital capacity is huge. We have issues related to safety, privacy, and digital skills. These enhancements and capacity for our community will not only help us with the census, but will also help us with fintech, as people are moving more and more to using technology for financial reasons. I think the census also, the digital capacity issue is dangerous because there's issues related, again, to privacy and safety. And so how will people, they need to be careful that if their data is not compromised, that people are not trying to be falsely claiming to help them with the census, yet committing fraud. That affects the cause. Last but not least, working with philanthropy. I'm proud to say that Philadelphia is doing a great job of mobilizing philanthropy around that, and one of the foundations, the Fells Foundation, is taking a leadership role. As a matter of fact, next week, the coalition of foundations in the greater Philadelphia area are having an event where they're focused about how to increase their investments around the census. I know that that's not something that's only happening in Philadelphia, and I'm proud to say that that we played a role in making that happen. In terms of the barriers, we know there's population changes, right? And we know there's gentrification and displacement. We also know that there is, at least in Philadelphia, a Hispanic homeless paradox, where although there's a number of Latinos who qualify for homeless services, they're not getting those services. And so we're using census data from the last census to analyze the disparity. And again, it shows how that data is so important. Interference, and I hate to say this, we need to make sure that we take into account safety, because there's going to be some people who are going to try to interfere with our efforts in this crazy world in which we live in today. So although it's not a nice thought, we need to be ready for it and make sure that any rogue elements do not either use physically or passively aggressively try to distort our message. So in conclusion, I just want to repeat, we need to try all of the above, all hands on deck, think outside the box, and be very localized. Gracias.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. This concludes our third panelist presentation. I'd like to see if commissioners have any questions. Yes, Commissioner Cavanaugh.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And my question is for Mr. Gonzalez. I know that Pennsylvania has received a great number of Puerto Ricans as a result of the hurricane, and the same has happened in Ohio and other surrounding states. And early in your presentation, you mentioned the topic of housing. Are you using any type of different strategy to reach out to this new incoming Puerto Rican communities into your state? And what might be some of the things that, as a commission, we need to make sure we document in regards to making sure the Puerto Rican diaspora is counted?
Well, thank you for your question, especially when it's made today. Today is the 18-month anniversary of Hurricane Maria. And that means a lot because after 18 months, those of you who are familiar with FEMA, some things stop being in effect, right? And as a matter of fact, I'm missing a major event in Philadelphia where we're where we brought together a number of nonprofits to work together to help Puerto Rican evacuees. And so actually taking place at this time. Philadelphia is the 10th in terms of number of counties in the United States, top 10 that received evacuees. What's interesting is that there were many more evacuees who arrived outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania if you look at that 222 corridor. So yes, there's a large number. And so what are we doing? We're going to continue to work with them, just as we registered them to vote, just as we made sure that they could make use of social services, make use of programs like super preference for housing. So we're working with them. We're not giving up. We know that although Hurricane Maria was 18 months ago, there's still a large number of Puerto Ricans coming over. So what we're doing is very localized and very focused on making sure that they are familiar with what needs to be done. Puerto Ricans have an advantage in this, in a way, because they've had to deal with the census before, be it in Puerto Rico or wherever else they are. So there's an advantage. I still think that it's important to be very localized and know that the way that we speak to a Puerto Rican about the census is very different than the way we would speak to a Mexican or to a Honduran.
Yes, Commissioner Tobin.
Thank you. You brought up a great point. That Teatro Invisible that's awesome. That's a great concept. One of the things that I've mentioned in the past, and I spoke to Arturo, is if we could get a list of all the brands that cater to Latinos or the ethnic diversity, and talk to them about possibly putting the Census 2020 on every package. And we know that psychologically, it takes about 7 touch points for people to absorb or for something to sink in. And so if we can have census product placement on something, and in the back it says tu cuentas or something, and I would do the S in cuentas with money signs. And then, they start seeing it in different places, and they see it on Goya, and they see it on something else. I know it's a sensitive topic, maybe for major brands like the Coca-Colas of the world. Maybe they don't want to get too political. But those who are catering and very specifically, I believe they have a responsibility to the Latinos because they are profiting directly from them. And we need to make sure that they help pass on that message. Again, who's going to suffer? They're going to suffer because if we're saying that in the urban cores, not everyone, obviously, because I hate to make the analogy when we talk about jobs and we always say, or it's mentioned many times that Latinos have the janitorial jobs. That's not the case. But they're also not taking those jobs away from people. But it's important that we distinguish that and I don't want to say force them, but definitely get them to get more involved. With that said, the other part that I had in regards to what Ms. Tak was saying, my family's from Colombia, and I know in certain Central and South American countries, unless you go to vote, you cannot seek services from the government. Now, I know that we can't do that here. But I challenge everyone to think, how can we create something that for those who don't voluntarily get involved, because they don't understand the consequences of it, how do we involuntarily get them involved? And that's a challenge. And that's like D-Day, right? Because it has to be perfect. Otherwise, people are going to get hurt along the way. And we don't want to hurt those we're trying to protect, but many of them don't know they're going to hurt themselves if they don't get involved. So I think it's up to us as leaders and self-imposed leaders, because we decided to do this, to get the people involved and figure out either you volunteer or you involuntarily get involved, but you're going to be protected along the way. And I think that's where Title 13 comes into play, where we're going to expound upon that and say, you will be fine, you will be fine. But again, I challenge everyone here and whoever watches, let's find that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Tejada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you, both of you. I was doing some distancing of how far you've come from Philly. That's quite a way to come here, so thank you very much. And of course, thank you also for your testing, both of you. And I think the bottom line is we're all after as it was mentioned, a genuine, complete count committee, or a count, a fair count. So I was taken by your suggestion of adopting a circus atmosphere and promoting, we're looking for everyone and all possibilities to motivate, cajole, trigger, activate our community to move forward, in addition to the other efforts besides our own community. You mentioned the Teatro Foro was very effective, things like that. And then you mentioned also fiesta and using música como rap. Presumably that also includes reggaeton, cumbia, merengue, salsa, cumbia rap, bachata. I'm ready to dance. I don't know about anybody here, but what would you suggest would be that magnet, 2 or 3 major celebrities in the Latino world that could help deliver that message? All of us know that the local level has to be at where we need to start. There are a multitude of leaders, and not just elected, but grassroots leaders who we need to be engaging and motivating to get our community. But if we were to have folks that are major attractions, what would you suggest would be 2 or 3 major Latino artists that would motivate either our young people and or some of us who are a little more mature to be counted?
That's one of the efforts, encouraging, it's nothing new to use some personalities like that, and I strongly encourage it. But I would spend more time on the more local, the hyper-local, all the way down to what was mentioned before, the lady who cooks in the school. And so in the case, if you're looking at the arts, there's the local artists, there's a local arts groups. That to me, I think is more, it's the hyper-local stuff that to me is you might get more bang for your buck. And so the Teatro Invisible, Teatro Foro, you're going to have some stipends, and you're going to have some of the foundations who are involved in the arts, involved in that and making things happen. And by the way, let's not also forget the non-Latinos. So, is the local opera, is the local chamber music stuff, put that on their radar screen too. And think of innovative of ways that the arts and this critical moment in our history, which is the census, which is, it deals with redistricting, it deals with accurate data, it deals with a lot of different things, that it's a moment for all of us. And so I think that, yes, choose celebrities, but also choose the local. Try to be hyper-local. And I think that's where philanthropy can come in and help a lot. And the nonprofits.
Madam Chair, if I can add a little more. And do you have any prior experiences, for example, with Teatro Foro that would have some results on any particular issue that could be a model?
Yes. So Teatro Invisible is the thing where only the artists know that there's theater going on. So in a bus, 2 guys are acting out. Teatro Foro is one where you know that there's a performance, and it's not that you sell tickets to the theater. So I use this with police accountability issues. So they would invite me to speak at GED classes or English as a second language classes, and I would say, I don't want to talk about myself. I want to talk about this issue. And so I would bring a a police officer, and I would bring a civil rights attorney. And then I would pick somebody from the audience, and I would say, you're going to be the police officer, go over there, talk with the officer. You're going to be the civil rights attorney, go over there. You two are going to be driving, and they're going to stop you. And then they would act out some things. And then Teatro Foro is a concept where you not only do that, but you do it even deeper, where you say, stop the action. What would you think we should do? And they said, okay, I think that, but then you come over here and do it. And so it just gets into your brain, and this is nothing new. Paulo Freire, and I forgot the name of the gentleman from Brazil, have done this in a lot of causes, and we went away from it. It's just it's very intense in time and intense, but I think that the times demand it, and I think it's also a way of trying to do some of it. And then I think the other thing is the audiences, that we should, the little kids, the little kids are going to tell mommy, papi what happened in school, what happened, did you, and attenuate some of the concerns that they may have.
Thank you, Commissioner Tobin.
Thank you. In regards to Teatro Foro, and then we've been talking about technology, the use of technology throughout, this morning and throughout this day. Current TV, if you guys are familiar with it, it was Al Gore's response to revolutionizing TV. And what he did is he bought a regular TV station, and he then went online, because remember, he gave us online, right? He went online, and then he created a space for people to do documentaries who typically would put them on YouTube but wouldn't get paid. And then what happened, there was a competition of documentaries that would pretty much, the audience would decide who's the best one. And then he'd give them $1,000, and then he'd call Tide and Clorox and everybody and say, I have this winner, pay the full price. And he'd put it on TV, and it was a hit. Why am I saying this? He revolutionized TV in that sense, right? Because he had the ratings before he went on TV. He made sure he had a winner before he got full price for that winner. I'm thinking this Teatro Foro, we can do something where we create a space online where you could, join with Telemundo or NBC, Comcast, and we start having these Teatro Foros. Who can tell the best story? Who can start changing these people up? And they start putting up, and that's going to start getting attention, and we're going to start talking about different scenarios. And we know that human creativity, especially in despair and when desperate, they really come up with unique things. And suddenly we're going to be talking to every person, every household in America, every parent, every student, everyone who doesn't recognize how they are a part of this. And I just think that that's brilliant, that Teatro Foro. And if we can mix it up with the technology, we have the outlets. And they're looking for good and provocative content. This can be it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I just want to say something really quickly. And again, if I have a magic wand, I would ask Naleo also to develop your own cyber protectors. Let me tell you why, because I talked about interference, right? And so you could have people spreading around false rumors to suppress the vote, to suppress the count. And so we need defenders. And so, and I don't know if philanthropy can come in or somebody can come in where we create a core that's monitoring, a core of people that's monitoring the internet and trying to make sure that there's no suppression of the count.
Thank you very much for that, those valuable presentations. And I think, you give us a lot of food for thought. Creative ideas and of things that we need to do as we have a full year ahead of us, starting April 1st, to be able to count everybody, but particularly the hard-to-count areas that we know exist in communities. At this time, I'd like to present give the panel a round of applause. Thank you for your coming. Thank you for coming and being able to share your valuable testimony. As we close, I'd like to welcome and introduce Mr. Arturo Vargas, Chief Executive Officer, Naleo Education Fund, someone that needs no introduction.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair Luby Navarro. I'd like to thank everybody who participated in today's commission hearing and all of the commission hearings that the National Latino Commission on Census 2020 has been holding since last year. The commission has given of its time to convene in Los Angeles, in New York City, in San Antonio, in Orlando, and this now our final hearing here in Columbus, Ohio, in the Midwest. So thank you to the local community who welcomed us here, the Commission on Hispanic Latino Affairs, Commissioner Lilly Cavanaugh, for your hard work in making this happen. Lair Marin Markham, Juan Jaimes, Jesse Dotson, Jonwin Zager Holman, the mayor's office, the city of Columbus, and Doug Murray in those offices. It's through these partnerships that Naleo Educational Fund is able to carry out its work. I want to extend a special appreciation to the members of the commission who traveled throughout the country over the past several months to receive testimony from our community, the purpose of which is for the country to understand what is at risk in Census 2020. I think we heard very vividly today from witnesses in Columbus and from Pennsylvania and Indiana and Illinois, Minnesota, about what's at risk for every American, not just Latinos. Our intention is to be able to issue a report that summarizes all of these challenges that we're experiencing as a nation, as well as recommendations that we will present to the Census Bureau itself, the Department of Commerce, to the White House, and to the Congress, so that we can continue in partnership to make sure that this country carries out its constitutional obligation to enumerate every single person who lives in this country. In your packets is information on what you can do to join us in this campaign. We invite you to be part of our national effort to make sure every single resident of the United States is counted. If you would like to submit written testimony to the commission, we will be receiving such testimony through April 5th. You can submit it online at pra@naleo.org. And as we continue our efforts at the Naleo Educational Fund, we continue to be partners with the Census Bureau to make sure that it is understanding the challenges and the opportunities it has to work with the Latino community. We're here to support the Census Bureau, to make sure it gets the resources from Congress to carry out its obligations. And we're also here to hold the Census Bureau accountable. Because ultimately, despite all the work that we will do with you and with all of our partners in our Get Out the Count efforts and developing collateral and doing the message and research and all of the other outreach, ultimately it is the Census Bureau's job to carry out the enumeration, and we will be there to make sure that it does all it's obligated to do to count everybody. So thank you for joining us here today, and if you would like to follow the work of the commission, please visit our website at naleo.org. And on May 22nd, again, is when the commission will convene one more time to release its findings and its recommendations. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you, Arturo. All of you, and wish you a safe travels back home. I particularly want to thank all of our commissioners. I know I've enjoyed this process, as well as Secretary of State Alex Padilla, who has been listening. This is, and I thank Naleo for convening this and the leadership of Mr. Vargas and Naleo Education Fund. It's truly been an honor to serve. I know I speak for each of the commissioners. We've been here, this is only the beginning as we issue the report. I know there's a lot of work to be done. Thank you, Arturo, and thank you all for coming. Thank you. And we can't forget to thank our amazing Naleo staff, Rosalind, Juliana, and everyone that is part of the team in all of these states that we've traveled. I can tell you that Naleo staff is exceptional. I'm honored to be part of this organization and know the caliber of the staff that Arturo, that you assemble. Thank you.